Welcome, everybody, to Swords of Reason right here on the Speakeasy Show, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. This is where logic meets passion. All right, if you're new here, the format is simple. Each debater gets 10 minutes for their opening statements, followed by 5 minutes of uninterrupted rebuttals. After that, we enter the arena for a full hour of back and forth debate. This is where the arguments can clash and the iron can sharpen the iron. And finally, each side delivers a 5-minute closing statement to lock in their case. When that's done, we're going to move into a 30-minute Q&A. I'll drop a Q&A in the chat there for you guys, but keep in mind that Super Chats, PayPals, Cash Apps, these questions will get priority. So if they fill up the entire 30 minutes, the free chat questions may not get answered. So if there's something you want guaranteed to be asked, make sure you send it through Super Chat, Cash App, or PayPal. And once the formal debate wraps, we open the doors for a chaos and chill panel. This is where the community can hop in, challenge the debaters, ask follow-ups if the debaters choose to stick around for this, because that part is optional for them. But it's always where things get wild regardless. All right. Tonight's debate prompt is we should get rid of the Civil Rights Act. All right. And for today's debaters, for the affirmative, we have Marte Reyes, a professional bodybuilder who blends pop culture commentary, political debate, and an unapologetic walk with God, carrying the discipline of the gym straight into the arena of ideas. His YouTube channel is linked in the description below. And for the negative, we have the Vigilante TV. Vigilante, the voice behind Vigilante TV, a returning presence in the Swords of Reason arena, known for sharp political commentary and high energy gaming streams. He's built a strong following over on Twitch with additional content on YouTube. If you enjoy bold takes and unfiltered analysis, you're in for a good one tonight. Okay, you can also find his channel link down in the description as well. And with that being said, we're going to get right into the opening statement. So, Marte, whenever you are ready for your opening statement, I will start the timer up with your voice.
Yeah, I want to make sure that you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, good. I know I was listening to the chat. You can start everything, and I was being called Clayton Bigsby, which is far from the truth, actually. More like Uncle Ruckus. Let's get it straight. So anyways, back to this. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, CRA, was groundbreaking, ending overt discrimination, but its broad, vague language, especially on sex, has become suboptimal as far as fueling overreach, endless lawsuits, and reverse discrimination. So that's the guise of and the crux of my whole argument. Mind you, why the CRA is no longer optimal and too broad, originally focused on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. The CRA lacks explicit mention of sexual orientation on gender identity. The 2020 Bostock versus Clayton County ruling expanded sex to include these, allowing courts and agencies to stretch protections into transgender sports, pronoun policies, gender-affirming care mandates, and DEI initiatives, which in previous debates, I've already displayed that they're racist towards white people, white heterosexual males implicitly. So back to this creates conflicting rights clashes. Ergo, the LGBTQ inclusions versus women's privacy or religious freedoms. Policy flip-flops across administrations, the subjective enforcement that divides rather than unites society. How it drives lawsuits and the division, the expansion has triggered a litigation surge. Over 250 Bostock-cited cases, costing billions and eroding trust in the public. Examples include religious employers suing LGBTQ over hiring mandates. This would include the Bear Creek Bible Church versus EEOC in 2023, parents channeling school curricula, Mahmoud versus Taylor in 2025, and we can dive into that. The states defending trans athlete bans amid backlash, hundreds of bills in 2025 to 2026, and reverse discrimination enabled by expansions. LGBTQ trans advocacy has used CRA interpretations to prioritize certain groups, leading to claims of unfair treatment. Heterosexuals, including men, in Ames versus Ohio Department of Youth Services 2025 Supreme Court unanimous, a straight woman alleges reverse discrimination when promotions favored LGBTQ colleagues. The court eased standards for such claims, applying equals to heterosexual men in similar scenarios. These show how Civil Rights Act expansions create new inequities, breeding resentment among the populace. So here's my solution. I can complain and bitch and moan about certain things and how CRA is doing certain things, but I'm not really helping the problem unless I have a solution. Here's my solution. I say that we replace the Civil Rights Act with the Unity Through Merit Act, the UTMA. This is going to repeal outdated CRA elements and enact a modern framework prioritizing individual merit, societal economic need, and narrowing anti-discrimination rules. No identity quotas or vague expansions. See how I just did that there? We can eliminate the Civil Rights Act and replace it with something better. This actually is less rife with abuse, and I can actually go into the debate. When we get into it, I'm going to talk about how we can enact and replace this too, because if you're going to complain about something, we have to remove it, but you have to replace it with something comparable and actually better too than the previous predecessor that we had. So this features merit-based opportunities with socioeconomical preferences, income, geography for equity without reverse bias. So it can't be used against other races at the time, or it would be harder to do this. Holistic tools, which are mentorship, this is included bias audits, community programs for cohesion, and I could talk about how we can induct this, and reduce litigation via clear definitions and exemptions. The UTMA, the Unity Through Merit Act, restores fairness, adapts to today, and heals divisions by empowering individuals over groups, proving the critical rights act of the Civil Rights Act, while historic, now hinders true equality. I understand that you're arguing that we shouldn't eliminate this. The problem with this is it's been weaponized through lawsuits that divide rather than unite. The Unity Through Merit Act will replace this with these core fixes. This includes decisions in jobs, schools, and public services. They must be based only on merit. So if you ask me what that is, this is qualification through skills and performance. This takes out all the quotas that destroy everything and gets used against us, and preferences, which we're going to reduce this, and I can dive into this, or identity-based advantages. You can't get on the police force if you're inadequate. You can't do other things, because this is what Civil Rights Act has done as well, too. If you're not qualified for this, because you're a liability. So this is airline pilots. Shaniqua can't fly so plane, too. If she's inadequate, it has to be merit-based, and I think that's safer, provides more safeguards, and also less liabilities as well, too. This limits liability to intentional discrimination only. This ends disparate impacts, which is lawsuits against neutral rules. This also protects religious freedoms and free speech, so people aren't forced to affirm beliefs or pronouns against their conscience. You see what I did there too? This also goes against the LGBTQ, using the Civil Rights Act and weaponizing this against religious people, i.e. the people that baked a cake and they were getting sued by these LGBTQ people because of you're not going to acclimate your Christianity to affirm our beliefs. Throw this out the water. The Unity Through Merit Act replaces this. It eliminates all this shit too. Focus enforcement on real equality of opportunity, not engineering equality of outcomes. This approach returns to the original goal. Here's the summation of everything that I just said. Judge people by their character and ability, not group identity. It reduces resentment, once again, promotes excellence in critical fields, aviation, medicine, policing, and builds national unity through shared standards instead of divisions. Merit-based systems have historically worked well without sacrificing fairness. I mean, I'll even ask a question right now, which I don't want to hear the answer yet. Do you want a DEI person who's a heart surgeon working on you? Probably not. Do you want a DEI person that's working through, matter of fact, I would say through preference, through sex-based preference, flying your cockpit when there was 9 designated pilots who are way more competent and fair, and I would say the standards were more consistent, and they're going to put this female on the plane because she's a woman and they have to fulfill quotas, when there's 9 pilots who are way more, I would say, acclimated, merit-based, and proven their grit through testing, rigorism as far as like education and adaptability. I'd say, no, you don't want any of this stuff. So although I could say we should get rid of the Civil Rights Act, we can replace this through the Unity Through Merit Act, which is a better system. And I could talk about what it does, how we're going to systematically do this, how we can get people on board through propaganda. And then not only this, but we're reducing liabilities as well, too, in lawsuits. This should be an open and slam dunk shut case when it comes to this, but we're going to go through this whole hour and try to litigate as to why we shouldn't replace this with something way better, way more optimal, when what we have right now is suboptimal and being weaponized against white people, being used against straight heterosexual men, or even straight people, period, by LGBTQ communities, and being co-opted by other people. Now, I know that I'm a black man against Civil Rights Act, but I can see how I can think outside of myself and understand how this affects other people, not just me. I think that true equity isn't putting a sex before everybody else, a certain group before everybody else. I think that merit-based systems are going to substantially increase the standards on education, increase the standards on safety, decrease liabilities, and improve standards in safety in America as far as resolving our issues and decreasing resentment in society as well, too. I'll end it there. I'm anxious to get into these arguments and hear my opposition's reference and return to this.
All right. Thank you for that opening statement. And with that, we're going to hand the mic over to Vigilante. And Vigilante, whenever you're ready for your opening statement, I'll start the timer up with your voice.
Yeah, that was a good opening. But throughout the debate, I don't expect to come hear an argument, unfortunately. Which, with this level of intelligence, we should expect to get from somebody willing to argue this against the Civil Rights Act's protections from segregation. We should expect a lot of DEI bad level of thinking, which is exactly what he said. But the Civil Rights Act is not just some DEI policy. It's not even a DEI policy. I'm going to separate that here in a minute. This is a moronic surface level understanding of what Civil Rights Act is about. As the affirmative, my opponent has the burden to build a case to prove his evidence, but as we've seen from his previous debates, his sources are trust me bro, anecdotes, and AI, none of which are valid sources. So let's be honest, we should be taking this with a grain of salt. So on to DEI. What is DEI? We all know that it stands for diversity, equity, inclusion. The intended purpose to have a wide range of people in organizations to create a diverse set of perspectives, ensuring that everybody has fair access to opportunities and treatment. Lastly, to create a culture where everyone feels respected and valued. In theory, this is a good idea, but just like all good ideas, it gets abused, whether it's by Disney saying they won't consider a white actor for a role, which they got sued for by Elon Musk, validly, or by Sweet Baby Inc. fucking over well-loved stories and intentionally destroying them in the name of feminism, like with the Suicide Squad game, where they completely destroyed the Batman storyline from the very much loved Gotham Knight game, Arkham Knight games, and all of that. So, I mean, should we throw out Christianity because it's got a history of being abused? Should we throw out capitalism because it has a history of being abused? No, that's fucking stupid thinking. But just to explain what DEI is. While you can claim that the Civil Rights Act is DEI, it's not. The purpose of the Civil Rights Act is to discourage discrimination by creating civil and criminal consequences. The Civil Rights Act, as a law, actually does what DEI claims it wants to do. It offers protections regardless of race and gender. It does not create bias towards one race, gender, or religion. It also bans segregation, increased voting protections, which I'm sure we'll get into later. The fact is, the Civil Rights Act benefits white people just as much, if not more, than people of color. A study by the Albany Law Schools found that under the Justice Roberts courts from 2005 to 2014 found that of the 7 cases claiming racial discrimination, again, put into the court by white people, all 7 were found in favor of the claimant. And out of the 11 cases brought by minority groups, only 5 of the cases were decided in favor of the minority group. It is the basis for all cases to be able to claim discrimination, including the one that I know yourself and the chat likely support, where Gina Carano, the chick from Mandalorian, sued Disney for firing her for discrimination of her political belief, which just reached a settlement. This is the effects of anti-discrimination protections. Do we want people to be able to discriminate against people because of their race, because of their gender, because of their religion? Are we willing to allow Christians to be discriminated against just because a business owner hates Christians? Are we willing to allow white people to be discriminated against because a company like Disney doesn't want to hire a white actor? Are we going to allow men to be discriminated against because women are better at certain jobs that require more empathy than men? Just because some of the people are stupid and overcorrect and abuse DEI programs, which are corporate level programs and for the most part are not policy, with the exception of affirmative action programs, but that's completely and totally different as well. And they use these to the degree of discriminating or borderline discriminating on minority groups. That doesn't mean that having the protections there in the first place is a bad thing. I'll see the rest of my time there.
All right. Thank you for that opening statement. And with that, we are going to head into the rebuttal round. This is where each side will get 5 minutes to uninterrupted to directly respond to their opponent's opening. So it's not a back and forth yet. And then when your 5 minutes are up, we go to the other side, and then we will get into the open hour. So with that being said, we are going to hand the mic back to Marte. And Marte, whenever you're ready for your rebuttal, I will start the timer up with your voice.
Yeah, it's almost like my opponent didn't hear the merit portion of what I said, which actually negates everything else. He also said, and I'll quantify this, says that I don't understand what DEI is or the Civil Rights Act is. Mind you, all my endless hours of research and all this note-taking may be forgotten, according to him. But let's get into this. Here's a much simpler, I'll even give you a hypothetical right now. A 150-year-old German beer hall run by old white guys gets forced by DEI rules to hire a perfect diversity squad overnight, according to his rule. And this is a little bit of hyperbole right now, but this can happen under CRA, but not under Unity Through Merit Act, which I'm going to say, which would replace this. A black trans vegan chef who bans all meat and cooking. A sober lesbian Muslim bartender who bans beer, an indigenous two-spirit server allergic to everything who bans half the ingredients, wheelchair-using non-binary manager who bans lederhosen. They rebrand as vegan, halal, nut-free, alcohol, trauma-free safety joy pod, serving mist, air, and regret. Everyone then sues everyone. Old customers sue for erasing German culture and pork. New staff sue each other and the owners for microaggressions, smells, photos, sounds, colors, and vibes. Fired white guys sue for reverse discrimination. PETA sues because tofu is offensive. Random passengers sue for emotional harm from the sign passing outside. Look, the place implodes in 4 days, burning, building seized, family homeless. Every protected class has a lawsuit against every protected class. So here's the crux. The Civil Rights Act has finally achieved perfect equity. Everybody equally bankrupt, equally miserable, and equally suing each other into oblivion. Diversity is so inclusive that it cancels itself. So while my opponent says that I do not understand what these things are, while not demonstrating how I don't understand how any of these things function or work, he has not actually had an argument against my Merit Through Unity Act. And what I'm offering now is a replacement. I have yet to hear how this actually is less optimal than what we have right now. He's saying that we shouldn't cancel it because of a few complaints. No, these aren't complaints. You're talking about $250 million worth of lawsuits and litigation that has happened ever since the Civil Rights Act. And that now, not only this, but mind you, insert the emotional argument right now. We had more black families prior to the Civil Rights Act that were more traditional, more intact. And also we had more black business owners having more longevity under rights of their businesses longer than before the Civil Rights Act enacted. And if you look at the stats concurrently, post Civil Rights Act, less black nuclear families are together, less minority families are together, less of these minority businesses are owned and have a more, I would say, a long tenure of business ownership post civil rights. Have we achieved everything off of this? No, actually, the reverse has happened in the process of this, actually. And we can dive into this as well, too. So going back to this, notice how I said vigilante, the merit through Systems Act. When we were talking about this, what I'm actually offering, because you said, well, we're going to throw out religion, we're going to throw all these other things. These are silly claims, actually, because the merit actually negates everything that you just talked about through testing, through competency levels, and making sure that people are fit, competent, and actually fit for duty for the job, meaning like mentally educated, adequate, competent, and also providing a safer infrastructure. I'd love to hear an argument against that. That's the crux of the whole argument. If you can give me an argument against why merit should be the thing that we should rail against and why that's bad compared to what we do is like a feels before reals dichotomy of the options we have, which is being weaponized right now by minorities who are now becoming the majority by way of like affirmative action through all these quotas and everything else. I've yet to hear an argument yet, but I'm anxious to get into this, and I'll actually cede my time because, I just want to hear this. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you for that rebuttal. And with that, we're going to hand the mic back over to Vigilante. And Vigilante, whenever you're ready for your uninterrupted rebuttal, I will start the timer up with your voice.
Yeah, so I'll get into the merit thing in a second. First, I want to address something that you mentioned in your opening, which was the cake baking case. That was actually proven to be fabricated. The company who brought that to the courts for against the DEI law that they were talking about. They actually never had a situation like that in their. No, it wasn't even that they didn't even have a situation like that. They weren't even a fucking baker. The person who brought that case wasn't even a fucking baker. Now, on to the merit thing. So the merit thing that you're talking about is more of a counter to DEI and affirmative action programs, which are not what the Civil Rights Act is. The Civil Rights Act just simply establishes the basis for Black people and women to be able to vote, and the basis for anti-discrimination during the hiring process of jobs, anti-discrimination for loans and things like that. So what your problem is not the Civil Rights Act. The merit-based program that you're talking about could easily be done on top of the Civil Rights Act, but your problem is with affirmative action laws and with DEI. Affirmative action laws are the things like the hiring quotas that you're talking about. Those are affirmative action laws. Yes, the Civil Rights Act leaves the door open for those, but it also leaves the door open for the merit-based shit that you're talking about as well. The Civil Rights Act, it leaves the door open for DEI, which I can agree with you has been abused. I gave a couple of examples of DEI being abused in my opening statement with the let me go back. The Sweet Baby Inc. stuff with the case that Elon's bringing against Disney, where Disney stated that they weren't going to hire. Whoop. Where'd he go?
Okay, there you go. I'll resume the timer.
Go ahead. I was trying to fix my volume. My chat couldn't hear him. So
all right, go ahead.
All right. So your problem is with the affirmative action laws. I mean, the Civil Rights Act, specifically the 1961, it just sets up the basis for these things. It you can argue that it leaves the door too open, but you can add on to laws like that. You can add in the merit-based stuff that you're talking about, and you can prevent DEI from going too far, like it has in certain cases, which we can agree on, because I'm not the like super pro DEI type of leftist that you probably think I am. I loved Asmongold up until he started being just another right-wing grifter. Because of all of the fucking anti-DEI stuff that he was talking about, because of how he was going about it, because he actually talked about it correctly. And then he just went downhill and became a fucking retard. But yeah, well, I'm good to go ahead and get into it.
All right. Thank you for that rebuttal. Great rebuttals from both sides. Before we move into the open hour of back and forth, let me talk to the audience real quick. If you're watching right now, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and also subscribe to tonight's debaters. Their links are in the description. We host all kinds of debates here on Swords of Reasons, politics, culture, ethics, anything where reasoning and passion collides, we put in the arena. So if you enjoy this format, make sure you stay locked in, because we have a lot more coming. Excuse me. Also, a reminder for the live chat. After closing statements, we're going to be doing a 30-minute Q&A. So I've already put the Q&A in the chat there for you. But remember, the super chats, PayPals, Cash Apps, these will get priority. So if it fills up the whole 30 minutes, we may not get to the chat questions. So if there's something you really want sent in and asked, make sure you send it through one of the priority options, and we'll make sure it gets asked. And then finally, thank you to both of our debaters for bringing your perspectives into the arena tonight. And whenever one of you is ready to start the open floor exchange, just jump in and I'll start the timer up with your voice.
So, Vigilante, I have a question. How do you justify defending a system that openly screws over entire groups by ability, then scream bigot at anybody who wants to stop it?
So, I mean, as I said, that the difference here is you're talking about the problems with DEI, not the problems with the Civil Rights Act. Sure, the Civil Rights Act leaves the door open for DEI policies, but that's just the system in general, because we haven't put the DEI is a social policy. It's mostly a corporate policy. It's not a policy.
Well,
it's not a legal policy.
This is being weaponized, and you can say, well, no, it's not a part of this, but people are using this. Like, matter of fact, I'll even bring up DEI. We could say that you can separate DEI from, I would say, the Civil Rights Act, and you could say that they could be two separate entities. However, I'll bring in one, because in my previous debate with First Amender, he said that in its onset, in its infancy, when DEI was promoted and actually brought onto the foray for people to use, it was in its rightful creation. I think that, people intended for its good use, right? But it's not being used in good nature. It's being the reverse right now. It's being used against people. So the Civil Rights Act, when you say it opens up the door, well, guess what's happening? The same thing's happening with Civil Rights Act, and people are now weaponizing this against the culture, against mafiols, and screaming bigotry, just like the DEI thing. They're doing the same thing with civil rights. When you say that, it cracks the door open. What I'm offering is an overhaul and a replacement. You can say, well, although it can work alongside the system, we can add it onto it. But no, what I'm saying is clean out the old system and replace it with something better. That's my whole premise.
I get where your premise is. The whole problem is the fact that your premise is flawed, because it's ignoring the fact that the Civil Rights Act doesn't do the things that you're talking about. The things that you're talking about, where you get like the unqualified people working as like a pilot or a doctor or things like that, that is affirmative action programs. That is not part of the Civil Rights Act.
That's being used in lieu of civil rights. People are actually using that to say that this is why. And they're referring to this as a referent to say, hey, this is why I'm not being afforded this opportunity. So, and that's my thing, though. I just wanted to ask this question. So you're cool with Civil Rights Act now being licensed to discriminate against whites, Asians, and men, as long as we call it equity? I don't think that that's equity. That's in my opinion, because it's usually it's being weaponized in that fashion right now.
The Civil Rights Act isn't what's being weaponized. DEI social policies for corporations is what's being weaponized. It's completely different. So we'll go into my first question, which is, do you know when DEI was established and how it was established?
DEI was formally established like a little while ago. And not only this, but it was established through policies. And I think there was a couple lawsuits before this even happened, which created a conundrum for people to initiate some change. And they brought this on the scene. I don't have the exact date that I know of, but the reason why is it was built as a safeguard to reconcile some of the issues we had as far as like some discriminatory policies we had with hiring, firing policies, things like that. Well, what I'm referring to, hopefully it answers your question, what I'm referring to is an overreach that's now using Civil Rights Act, because you've even admitted yourself in this debate and said, well, I understand how people can sneak things in and people can bake things in. That's what I'm referring to when it comes to DEI. But back to Civil Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act is being abused by LGBTQ communities as well, too. Believe it or not, I can cite several court cases where it's cost a lot of litigation and funding because they're saying that their civil rights are being infringed upon.
Yeah, so the modern DEI initiative, it started in the early 2000s, specifically with the corporate introductions of chief diversity officers. The laws that you're talking about, when you reference the laws, you're conflating affirmative action with DEI. They're two different things. Affirmative action is the policies like the ones that were done by the Obama, I think it was the Obama administration, where they had the hiring quotas and stuff, which we can both say that we're against. The Civil Rights Act is enough to prevent job discrimination, which is one of the things that the Civil Rights Act was for. The affirmative action programs do exactly what you said and can be used as reverse discrimination. I completely agree with you on that, but they're two completely different things. So do you know what the difference is between being proactive and reactive?
Yes, one's preventative, and then one is, I would say, a response to something that should have been, I would say, changed, right? That's how we come to these conclusions for initiating things like DEI and all that. I think that being proactive is a preemptive approach, and being reactive is like post course.
Yeah, so when you do proactive maintenance on your car, is it the same thing as when you do reactive maintenance on your car?
I mean, they both achieve the same result. Of course, one is post and one is preventative measures.
Yeah, so do you believe the Civil Rights Act is meant to be a proactive or reactive policy?
I believe that if you're, depending on who you are, I believe that it's been used as a reactive measure, as far as like something that has been moved from goalpost to goalpost. And I think that's conditional right now. That's what I'm saying. So here's the thing. Yes, there have been several cases as far as legal advocacy efforts where members of the LGBTQ community, and this is, let's get straight to the point, because I want to cut straight to the point, including transgender individuals who have invoked interpretations of the Civil Rights Act. This is them actually using the Civil Rights Act of 1964, particularly Title IX employment and title, which as far as education as well too, to challenge practices, policies rooted in certain Christian beliefs about marriage, sexuality, gender identity. All of these efforts, Vigilante, stem from the 2020 Supreme Court decision, and I'll bring it up again. I brought it up before, the Bostock versus Clayton County, which extended to sex discrimination protections under Title IX to include sexual orientation, gender identity. Do you think that that's very merit-based?
So that's just increasing the anti-discrimination protections within the Civil Rights Act to include gender identity.
Do you think
that's all that's doing?
Do you think that there, in that case, do you think there is abuse that happens?
There is abuse that happens when you talk about the DEI policies that
no, civil rights,
private policies. There's not abuse with the Civil Rights Act. No.
Well, according to this, we have invoked interpretations. This is by the LGBTQ community. They are literally using this. This has led to perceived conflicts with Christian values, such as opposition to same-sex marriage, recognition of transgender identities, in which some religious groups view as infringing on religious freedoms under the First Amendment Religious Freedoms Restoration Act. These are examples that I'm talking about, and a lot of these encroach on other people's rights. That's what I'm saying. So when you're talking about people like Riley Gaines, other issues, as far as this, I think that this happens a lot, and that's why that was such a big national scandal as well too. These courts have been balanced, try to balance these interests variably, right? Sometimes upholding religious exemptions, and other times favoring anti-discrimination claims. That's all they want to do, is bring things back to the forefront with just a merit-based approach. I think that my merit through my MTA Act is a great replacement, but I don't think that what we have right now is substantially better. I don't think it's better. I think that people are co-opting this through measures of DEI, through affirmative action, all these other things under the umbrella of the Civil Rights Act, using this as a reverse form of weaponization against people by saying McGrew.
Yeah, so I can agree with you that it would be a good idea to put in some sort of merit-based thing, but that only addresses the gaps in the Civil Rights Act that are the reason why we get things like affirmative action and a DEI. But that isn't something that is caused by the Civil Rights Act. It's just people bringing in their own new ideas and abusing them. All it is just people abusing slogans, because that's all DEI is a slogan.
So I'll bring up a case: the Bear Creek Bible Church and Braidwood Management versus EEOC. This is 2021-2023 Fifth Circuit. A Christian church for a for-profit Christian-owned business preemptively sued the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is the EEOC, under the Title IX, seeking exemptions from hiring or retaining employees engaging in homosexual or transgender conduct, which they viewed as conflicting with biblical teachings. This is a big fight that's happening right now. I think that when it comes to the Christianity, as far as their sense, I think they should be able to uphold this. But they're using the Civil Rights Act, which is an umbrella through, you could say, DEI, whatever this is, and everything else, affirmative action, to try to weaponize this against their belief system. I think that's bad. You see how we're still maintaining these religious beliefs, and I'm not trying to have overreach. That's a problem that's being created because of this as well too.
Well, no, you can't use religion to discriminate against people. I mean, let's take the Mormons for example. Let's take the Mormons for example. Do you
religion to acclimate to your belief? That's my point.
You literally can. That's what laws are for.
No, you can't. You can't say, I'm going to go to your church and you guys need to change what you're doing here at your property. Or even if, I have a cake making service and say, you guys need to make a cake for me. You guys can't discriminate against me and I'm a Christian service. I think that we have the right to refuse service. There's nothing wrong with that. If that's a belief system that we have.
If we shouldn't use laws to discriminate against religion, should we allow Mormons and Muslims to have polygamous marriages again in the United States?
When it comes to certain things, I think that there has to be a delineation, and I'll even give you a line that I can draw in the sand. Like in my example that I given you, let's say that we're making cakes. We're a religious practicing a cell phone business, and we want to deny you service because according to our religion, marriage is a sacrament. Not only is it a sacrament, but we don't believe that same-sex people should get married. And by making a cake for you, we are supporting that through our religious foundation that funds our business, right? Let's say we get tithings, support from the community, our religious community that supports this business. I think that they should be able to refuse that because there's plenty of other things and plenty of other ways they can utilize at their means. Matter of fact, striking, removing purchasing from that business. People did this all the time. They picketed against businesses. They've also said, you know what, I'm just not going to buy from your business. They can do that. But suing people, this is where we get into the litigation territory. And we're saying, no, Christians must bake cakes for lesbians and gays. That's crazy.
I mean, here's the thing. Like, you can literally sue people in this country for fucking anything. Like, I could sue you for being a dick. It's like
I'm reducing litigation and I'm reducing these lawsuits because if we have something clear, firm, fair, and consistent across the board, I think there's been too much overreach with this.
I mean, that's just a flaw in the system that we have, where you can just sue anybody for anything. Like, sure, it addresses the frivolous lawsuits in one sector, but there's still plenty of frivolous lawsuits that happen. That's why we have a whole separate civil court system than we do the criminal court system.
Right, but do you understand that this case highlights the tensions where LGBTQ rights expansions under Civil Rights Act were seen as burdensome to Christian-operated businesses? That's my point. So the Aubrey McMahon versus World Vision, and of course, everybody knows who World Vision is, a Christian company. A woman sued the Christian nonprofit after it rescinded her job offer upon learning she was married to same-sex partner, alleging the Title IX sex discrimination. Literally using the Civil Rights Act against this. I think that they should be able to deny when it comes to this, because that doesn't conform to their religious beliefs. You see how that's consistent? It's a religious belief, and according to them, they can have pamphlets, brochures, and saying, hey, this is our belief fundamentally, and if a lesbian comes in with the same-sex belief system, I think she should, and she knows inherently that we don't believe in that. Why should she be able to sue me to change our belief systems to acclimate to them? That's crazy.
So I'm going to answer that this way. With the Mormons, are you familiar with the Mormon belief system?
To some degree.
So the Mormons, they believe that people like you, black people, are cursed by God and bear the mark of Cain. And they don't allow, up until fairly recently, they didn't allow black people into the Mormon church because of that. Do you think they should be legally be able to segregate black people out of the church because it's part of their belief that black people are unsavable and cursed by God?
Do I think that they should maintain these beliefs that they once had before they converted to LDS instead of Mormons? Because that's been a change. It's like almost a public image change that they've recently had, to my understanding.
It's a change that happened about 10 years ago. It's a very, very recent change.
Yeah, that's very recent. 10 years is pretty recent. So I think that if Mormons can deny black people from coming in their church, that's fine. I don't care, because KKK denies access for me to be a member in there. I mean, unless my name is Clayton Bigsby, I'm not going to be a part of the Ku Klux Klan. Like, that's a belief system. What they're talking about is like an ideology in a group that they have. Like, you're allowed to have your ideology intact in your group, as long as you aren't having an overcorrection and you're not encroaching on people's personal businesses, the way that they make money, certain things. Now, granted, you can actually boycott. Boycotting is a powerful thing that people have done. If you're the gay person saying that this Christian company won't make my cake, you can boycott and just say, I'm just not going to support it. That's fine. That's a very impactful tool that everybody has at their disposal. That's valid. I don't see anything wrong with that. So back to your question, the Mormon church, if they were to say, well, we don't allow black people to be a part of our congregation, like, that's your belief system. I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah, but there's a difference between a legal 501c3 where they're tax exempt and are not allowed to have discriminatory policies and stuff and things like that because they are tax exempt, and the KKK, which is a fucking terrorist organization. There is a very, very clear difference between those two.
Well, hold on. They can say things like the Muslim religion is a terrorist organization as well too, or a law, an ideological system that's law based, that is kind of a terrorist belief system as well too. They can say that too, but it's the same thing as, like, I mean, think about it. Trump basically put a Muslim ban on everybody else who's Islamic, part of the Islamic regime, or I would say outwardly Muslim, from coming into the United States. That flew and it worked, and most people, the majority of Americans, supported that. So it's like, if you think about it like this, it's like, yes, of course, if there's harm with that, we can say no. We can just bar this outright and just say, you know what, I'm not going to cooperate. So boycotting, people can boycott the U.S. You don't have to enter the U.S. See how that works? It's like firm, fair, and consistent across the board. So if I'm talking about businesses like this, it's like anybody can view terror, just like you said, anybody can sue for anything in the United States. What my Unity Through Merit Act does is reduce lawsuits. I'm actually reducing lawsuits, and I'm saying, in order for you to fly a jet, and I'm not talking about like everything, because I can be really concise here and narrow it down to three things. I would say to sciences, I would say to like the health industry, and I would say to most high functioning like aerospace jobs and things like that that support our infrastructure at the highest levels. I think things like that. For example, there's more than that, but if you're gonna like bake a cake, like I'm not gonna like whittle it down and equivocate to where it's like, okay, you can't be a scrap worker in a yard or anything like that because of this. What I'm talking about is like things that are rife with lawsuits, like industries like this, where it jeopardizes mass safety, casualties if you get the wrong person who's like less qualified for this job, things like that. But back to what you're saying, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that.
You don't think there's anything wrong with so you don't think that there's anything wrong with religious organizations basically openly promoting segregation?
If they're going to segregate, what's going to follow suit is naturally people are going to boycott these industries, organizations, or ideological belief systems. They're going to naturally boycott it. As a matter of fact, you can have all the grassroots operations all you want. The KKK's had this since the dawn of time, or the inception of their organization. And guess what? They float. All you're going to do is create like a black roots operation, or maybe even like it's not going to stop the organization from saying that we're not going to allow black people no matter what. You can't force them to do this, just like you can't force a Christian organization to bake cakes. It's not going to happen. Like there's no way. And even in my mindset, if I have a Christian organization, it's an Orthodox Christian bakery, like, yeah, you could try to sue me, but it's like all you're doing is just creating an issue that's rife with abuse by saying, you know what, because you're not acclimating to my belief system. You see where I'm getting at? It's like you have to be able to have people's belief systems intact without encroaching on them. You can either boycott them or leave them alone. I think I have a black and white approach to these things.
Yeah, I mean, there's a very clear difference in our approaches with these things, because I mean, I would qualify the KKK as a terrorist organization and think that we should treat them the same way that we do organizations like ISIS.
Well, the KKK, I would say it's all a case by case scenario. So the KKK, we've actually had them exist in my state, I would say, but nobody goes after them. Nobody like tries to eliminate them. Yeah, sure. You guys are going to have your groups, which they do here. Matter of fact, they have their groups and they're allowed to exist, but if they're not blowing up buildings, doing certain things, like they have their own community, whatever, what you're doing is creating an ostracization upon yourself, because everybody else is going to exclude you. They're going to boycott you. They're going to say, oh, you're one of those people. I'm not selling to you. That's what's going to happen. People will ostracize themselves, and the majority will say, no, we're not participating in what you're doing. And what happens is, just like any system in the body, once you cut off the blood flow, it dies, or it's going to have a hard struggle ahead of it itself if it wants to continue.
So, on to back to the civil rights stuff. What do you think would actually happen if we got rid of the Civil Rights Act?
Great, I'm glad you asked. So this is my how-to, right? So if we got rid of the Civil Rights Act, my Unity Through Merit Act would replace these core fixes, which means that decisions and jobs would be fixed, schools, public services, meaning that your teacher that educates your student wouldn't be there because she's a woman or she's black or whatever. It would be because she's competent enough to teach your children or your child at school. And you know that your child's going to get the most quality education. I think that if we can, because this has been a rampant debate that we've had about public school versus private schools. Well, the main crux of even that argument is competency. So the Unity Through Merit Act fixes a lot of this, meaning like if a teacher decides to teach my children at a school, I know that she got there because of her hard work, her ethic, as far as like hard work ethic. And also there's criteria that she has to fulfill. She just can't get in there because she's a woman or because, you know, she's her melanin or whatever. I know that there's more competency in the school, and guess what's going to happen? Grades are going to go up. You know, other standards are going to rise as well too, because if the teacher standards are higher, everything else is going to follow suit, because you don't really appreciate anything unless you have to work for it.
Yeah, so that only fixes the DEI related stuff of the abuses. So I have to ask, was segregation and Jim Crow a good thing? Because getting rid of the Civil Rights Act would bring back segregation.
No, it wouldn't necessarily do that if we replace this with the Unity Through Merit Act. Like I said,
where are the segregation protections.
No, with the Unity Through Merit Act, there are going to be protections against this, meaning like religious protections, religious speech, and all this other stuff. There's no safeguard when it comes to that now that we see. Like the scenarios, the nightmare scenarios that you've also said is like, no, we should sue a Christian organization in oblivion if they don't adopt like a lesbian couple to come in and acclimate, force them to acclimate to what they're doing. And it's like, no, we shouldn't have Christian organizations acclimate to some LGBTQ scenario. I think that that's bad. That's rife with abuse. People take advantage of this all the time. So what the Unity Through Merit Act does is it promotes not only religious freedom, and I'll tell you how we can even, while there's overlap. So let's say that there's a business, and we're going to go back to this real quick because I want to get past this. Let's say that there's a business and the religious company says, hey, we have pamphlets out front. We have criteria that must be fulfilled because in order to be even a Christian, just like a church, our business, this is what our belief systems are, this and that. But you know that the lesbian couple that's applying to have their cake baked or whatever services they want from this tailored suits or whatever else like this, they literally know that they're fighting against something and they just want to create drama. That's literally what this is. There's nobody in their right mind that would approach the, I would say the Mormon church and say that even though you guys still believe in excluding blacks, like you guys have to force a black mandate in your church. That's the ostracization thing that I'm talking about. But that's what I'm saying. It doesn't, it actually has safeguards against this. Through the merit and also skills, performance, we're eliminating quotas too that are, I would say, senseless. If you're going to have a woman on the police force and she beats out 7 guys, but not through hard work and merit, she's just a liability. But you see how this undermines everything else through the umbrella of the Civil Rights Act. You can say, well, no, they're 2 different things, but they operate underneath this umbrella. If we can slowly start changing this and replace this to the Unity Through Merit Act, that would be a great thing. So no, we're not going to go to Jim Crow if we can replace this with something more optimal.
So in your Unity Through Merit Act, where are the anti-segregation laws? Because that's what the Civil Rights Act is an anti-segregation law. It prevents segregation.
So you can't have, so the problem with this is reverse discrimination also has reverse segregation that happens too. Meaning like they're weaponizing this, meaning like if I'm LGBTQ, you must acclimate to my belief system. If not, I'm going to sue you into oblivion. You see how that works in the inverse? I think that that's bad. That's rife with abuse. And also this happens as well too. Like if I'm going up to the Mormon church or a Mormon organization and says you have to include black people, now they have to change their core fundamentals and principles to acclimate to what I'm doing. Like, I think like that's an overreach, man. I think it's an overreach for sure, man.
So if we instituted your, so let's just operate from now on that we've instituted your Merit Act. Okay. So how would we prevent segregation laws from popping back up? Or would you be okay with segregation laws popping back up?
So how we can do this is, and I'll tell you how, we're going to focus on enforcement as far as equality of opportunity, not outcome. We're talking about opportunity, right? So back to this, it's going to stop a lot of lawsuits that are frivolous. Matter of fact, there's going to be a reduction of this because it's going to be more black and white. There's going to be a clear, concise, consistent standard that's set. Like as far as like the religious, the religious tone that's set, like clearly there's pamphlets that I said in my hypothetical, and clearly there's like belief systems that this religion has. That's black and white, but there's an overreach. It doesn't correct that. But if we're talking about the black and white standards and we acknowledge that the Mormon church has this belief system, we're going to respect that. That's pretty black and white. Now, you can try to sue them into oblivion. The judge is going to be like, well, clearly you knew what you were getting into because according to our bylaws, you're supposed to, if you have like a religious service, you're supposed to have pamphlets. You're supposed to have like requirements. Like if you're going to operate a religious business, you're supposed to have an exit. And not only this, you're supposed to have documentation saying that your religious business and all this. There's clear black and white structure that's in there that's saying, okay, cool, you can either boycott this or not. You knew what you were getting into. How can I sue this when I knew that this was their standard? But with your system that we have intact, it's like, you're not going to include me because you have to be equal to us and we have to force integration amongst ourselves. Now what you're doing is eroding their core principles of their belief system and also their business and their foundational functions. You remember, these people have families that are being raised underneath these belief systems. And in order to actually stop faulty belief systems, we actually have to boycott them or not participate them and exclude them. And that's the way that you can destroy them. Take out the lifeblood and you could stop that or make it a hardship for them. That's how we could do this, not through lawsuits, not through frivolous claims that we have.
Okay, so you'd be okay with people discriminating, basically.
People discriminate all the time, but what you're doing is you're allowing the reverse of this happening with the Civil Rights Act. And DEI, remember, we're going to keep these two things separate. People are using DEI under the guise of Civil Rights Act, and they're using affirmative action under the guise of Civil Rights Act, and they're using this, weaponizing this against white heterosexual males, against other people by saying, because I'm in a group and I'm a minority, you have to conform to me. That's bad. So what this does,
that's what DEI and affirmative action are.
But what this does is it eliminates that. It actually cuts a lot of these frivolous lawsuits out and saying, okay, cool. I understand you're a part of a separate group, but everybody underneath this Unity Through Merit Act has to fulfill these requirements and has to pass these standardized tests that we have. It doesn't matter if you're Indigenous, Native. It doesn't matter if you're Canadian. It doesn't matter if you're American, white, or black, or whatever it is. We have standards, and that reduces lawsuits. It actually increases safety. It increases the standard of product, and it brings USA back because it makes America great again, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay, so real quick, what do you see as reverse discrimination?
Everything that I've stated before, like reverse discrimination. I'll even give you examples of this too. So the examples I'll bring up are court cases that were cited. So Bonberger versus St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. A white officer won at a trial. The verdict was upheld after claiming he was passed over for promotion in favor of less qualified black women due to race-based favoritism. I have a couple of these I can bring up too. A Hispanic lieutenant won $254,000 from a jury after alleging a predominantly black department repeatedly promoted less qualified black candidates over him. White teachers claimed a black principal treated them worse, excluded them from meetings, terminated them, and replaced them with less qualified black staff. You see how this is rife with abuse? That's reverse discrimination.
What you're describing is literally just discrimination.
Well, no.
Your problem with
is this against people. DEI is reverse discrimination. Not to mention this, but people who aren't hired off of merit-based programs and affirmative action, that's reverse discrimination.
So no, it's literally discrimination. Like I brought this up in my opening statement. Like when the leaked call from the Disney executive, where they stated that they weren't going to hire a white actor for a specific role. I can't remember what role it was. That isn't reverse discrimination. That's just discrimination. That's why when Elon's fucking lawsuit goes to court, they're going to fucking lose. That's why they lost with the Mandalorian actor chick, because that shit was just discrimination. It's not reverse discrimination. That's just a buzzword.
Reverse discrimination is using the very same law that's used to bring equality and fairness on a certain segregated class, you would say maybe even a minority group, to use this and weaponize this against a perceived act of somebody who's like an overreach or excluding you because of your feelings or because you feel like you're being wronged, when really, when you look at things and you peel everything away, it's really a merit-based thing that the company's using. But this is reverse discrimination to me. If I'm not being hired on merit, I'm going to try to figure out how to sue my way into this job. And if I can't sue my way into this job, I'm going to take money. That's what reverse discrimination is. When you're using the very same system that's supposed to be a safeguard against discrimination, against the very same people that you don't want to have discriminated against. This is being used in the inverse.
Okay. Can you do me a favor and define discrimination?
Discrimination is the act of excluding people because of race, I would say color, creed, things like this, solely because of these things. And these could be things that are like things that you can't change, for sure. Like that's an obvious thing. Now,
yeah,
the problem with the problem with your claim of saying that it's just discrimination is it's often used against people, because if you have a class of people who aren't trying to get through to a job through a merit-based system or through their own works or even hard work and determination, they're just going to subvert the system and say, oh, because you hate me, and then sue the company or whatever this is. That's bad. That's reverse discrimination.
So I think I see where the issue is. You're conflating discrimination with racism. So you could argue that these things are reverse racism, because racism as a definition.
No, that is still reverse discrimination. Still,
no, it would technically be inverse racism, not inverse discrimination. The reason why is because there's no qualifiers on discrimination for it to be specifically for minority groups. It's just prejudicial treatment against different categories of people, especially on the grounds of ethnicity, age, sex, or disability. What racism is, it adds the qualifier of minority groups specifically. So you could argue that it's reverse racism, but it's not reverse discrimination.
No, hold on. If you're using race, that's a form of discrimination. You're discriminating because of that. They can be one and the same. So if you're saying that, no, we're just going to, all you're doing is just a label change and saying that's the same thing, but also saying it's not the same thing, which is really weird that you're doing this right now. So what I'm saying though, and I can create this distinction. So if I discriminate somebody because of race, like, in order to say it's just racism, a lot of these cases, people aren't outwardly saying because you're black, I'm firing you. They're literally saying because you're unqualified to work, but the other person's claiming it's racism, therefore discrimination, because a lot of these people that are being sued aren't even bringing up race in courts. So it's discrimination. So when we think about this, they're just alleging it's because of race. That's the distinction.
Yes, but with it being about race, that would make it about racism.
They're assumed.
Yes, it would make it assumed about racism. Discrimination.
No, it's discrimination.
Then it's discrimination. Hold on. Discrimination, regardless of if you're white, black, Mexican, it's when they're acting like if they fire you when they're alleging. When you sue for alleging discrimination, that's just alleging discrimination. It's not alleging reverse discrimination.
The word alleged, discrimination. The word alleged is using a lot of the heavy lifting right now. When you're saying alleged, when you don't even have a clear, concise example, when these court cases that I just brought up, these people are alleging that that's what's happening right now, and really they haven't even ruled that that's what's happening right now, because the person that they're, I would say, legally accusing of this hasn't even cited race. They haven't even cited race. It's pure discrimination, to be honest. While you can say that race is alleged, you notice how you just said alleged and you smuggled that in. We don't even know, because the person that's being sued into oblivion hasn't brought up race. It's discrimination. Now you can say under the guise of assumed racism, you can say that, then that's more accurate. If you say assumed racism, yeah, but it's discrimination. Let's be honest, so we can get past this point.
Yeah, I was just pointing out the conflation of the definition of racism with the conflation of the definition of discrimination, because there's no reverse discrimination. It's just discrimination.
No, so do you realize that let me get down to the crux of this. So would you believe that there's I'm going to break it down to like the fundamental premise of what I'm saying. So is there a difference between a ex-convict and a convict?
To a degree, yes.
To a degree, right? So there's a difference between racism and reverse racism. So the intention, if we're talking about this, because there's a prefix of X, and one of them is like reverse, meaning the intention of this being weaponized against the person. Do you believe that systems can be used against people and weaponized in, I would say, fraught with abuse? Do you believe that these systems that are inherently supposed to be for good can be weaponized against the very same people that were oppressed?
Yes, it can be weaponized against.
Is that a reversal?
No.
What? That's not a reverse.
But
I'm
because
using-
it's still just discrimination.
Wait, no. The intention is reversing. It's the same thing. If I get an Uno card and I reverse it and I switch the direction of the trajectory of where this is aimed at, because if we're playing Uno and it's going in one circle and I pull out the Uno reverse card and I'm using this in the other direction, because remember, the CRA is directional. It's directed towards a certain class that's supposed to be oppressed. But if I reverse this against the I would say if I have the inverse, that's a reversal, right?
I mean, okay, so like more like in the context of what we're talking about, it's not, because it's just we're just talking about blanking this
people.
Yeah, using it. Okay, so
that's a reversal.
No, because it's blanket. So like with the Civil Rights Act, it's just blanket race protection. That's why white people have won. No, that's why when we talk about like the Supreme Court cases based on race, white people have literally won 100% of their court cases.
So I forgot what it's called, because I was in law enforcement for like 13 years, but we're taught under the guise of this, saying that if there's a domestic violence call, that if we get called to a house, damn it, I forgot what it's called. It's like, I wish I can get a lifeline on this right now, but where it's assumed that the woman is the one that's being abused and the perpetrator no matter what. During this whole time, when we could say during Domestic Violence Act, we would assume that the woman's the victim and the guy's mostly the perpetrator. That's usually assumed in most cases, right?
Yes.
Okay, this is the train of logic that we're going to walk down on. So, do you think in recent times that this has been reversed against men?
Where they automatically assume that the woman's the abuser?
Yeah, they assume that the woman is the abuser, because we're talking about oppressed classes here, perceived notions of like walking into a situation and people have to make a judgment call. Do you believe that women are using this and weaponizing this against guys sometimes? Like, matter of fact, like the Amber Heard case, because they pleaded that she was a woman. Oh, poor Amber. Things like the Me Too movement, all this. When people have weaponized and reversed this on the very same people and saying, no, we're the people who are oppressed. We can't ever be the oppressor. We're always the victim. Do you think that that's happened in regards to this, like DV cases, Me Too movement, all this other stuff in society?
I wouldn't say that it's been reversed, but I would say that it's been weaponized.
So if it's being weaponized against the people who are supposed to be the oppressors, making somebody who was the oppressed class the oppressor now, wouldn't that be a reversal of such?
It would just be shifting the discrimination from one class to another.
That's a reversal that you just described. We're taking this and pointing it the other direction. That's a reverse.
So would you say that with apartheid in South Africa, when they got rid of apartheid, was that reverse discrimination?
When they got rid of apartheid, I think that's
yes.
So when it comes to apartheid, no, I don't think that that's reverse discrimination. I think that whenever you've had,
that's literally what you just described.
No, hold on. Let's get into if we're going to get into the weeds, let's get into it. So I'm not, and I'll be honest with you, I don't really have too much knowledge about apartheid. I just have a very surface level understanding about this, but I can't bring up something that's substantially, I wouldn't say correlative, but there's like a genocide that's happening with Christians right now. Trump recently sent in troops to eliminate, I think it's ISIS groups who are massacring all these Christians. And this is an oppressed class, right? And they're being massacred because of their Christian beliefs. Your question would, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, but your question would equate to, would this be reverse religious discrimination because they're fighting somebody who is eliminating all these Christian people?
Effectively, yeah, because it's basically what you described.
Right. So here's the thing, though, is if we can move things from goalpost to goalpost, we now have a substantial and I would say not merit, but we can look at examples of deaths that have happened. Meaning, like if we're looking at numbers, like the Matrix, let's picture this like the Matrix. We have a series of ones and zeros that happen here, right? Ones and zeros. We can look at lines on a board and saying these are the amounts of deaths that have happened of Christians, right? We can now say, okay, now this isn't a feelings-based thing. We can see the deaths. There's a death count that's happening here. I would say, along with the merit-based system, it's more black and white. We can look at numbers. We can now have a more clear judgment of saying, okay, who's more oppressed because we're looking at numbers. We're getting away from feelings now. If we're saying that 937 Christians have been massacred in the last 2 weeks, that's a clear number that we can point to. Now we can say, okay, this isn't being used in the reverse discrimination fashion. This is now we have a justification of a preemptive clause to say, all right, we have to end this annihilation happening. That's a completely different premise. So just like apartheid, I'm pretty sure that people are getting murdered, things like that. If we notice all these deaths, all we're doing is stopping deaths, which these deaths have numbers, right? And if we're adding up numbers, we can clearly see a concise number, and we can conflate this to a merit-based system, which is just numbers of people passing systems, tests, mandatory requirements, and things like that, which are black and white numbers. Going back to this, but your system doesn't include numbers. It doesn't include a standard or anything. It's just my feels. And I just want to see you because no matter what, even if you have a black and white system that omits black people or things like that, it's more black and white. If you don't want to be included, don't play. But when lives are at risk, which goes back to my system, saving lives in litigation, all I'm doing is saving taxpayers' money, and I'm stopping damages and liabilities, saving lives.
So if the standard is if lives are at risk, then instituting the Civil Rights Act and enforcing the Civil Rights Act wasn't reverse discrimination then.
No, I'm not saying that because we can even agree that DEI in its inception wasn't a bad thing. I'll even agree with you. But here's the sneaky thing people do, just like the Civil Rights Act and just like DEI and everything else, which, mind you, are two separate things. People can then use these systems and abuse them, like people taking food stamps, saying, okay, because when you start holding people to a requirement of like merit-based systems, like if you have to report in saying, here's the evidence, and I'll show you screenshots of like, maybe somebody could track it and there's a better system of this saying, I applied for 2 jobs this week in order to maintain my government assistance. That's more like merit. That's leaning more towards a merit-based system where it's like it's not kicking people off of food stamps, but it's showing, hey, if you do the work and I know that you're trying, we can let you leech off of the system to some degree. That's all I'm asking for is like people to have some accountability and actually have real numbers in sourcing real examples instead of just saying because I feel. I think that that's bad to have a system like that. My Unity Through Merit Acts actually implies a system that's being used when we're actually holding people to standards instead of like quotas because of like the fact you're born a woman and things like this. I don't want a heart surgeon that just got into a system because of I don't want a teacher teaching my kids just because she bid out 9 more qualified people. Like, that's not the system that I want. My Unity Through Merit Act eliminates this because now we have standards that are firm, fair, and consistent across the board. That's all I want. And this is a very simple premise.
Okay, but as we have addressed your Unity Through Merit Act, that is more of an addressment towards DEI and would work better in conjunction with the Civil Rights Act
and civil rights. But I think that we should eliminate that. I think
it wouldn't address civil rights because it would still allow for segregation.
Well, hold on. So there has to be segregation, and let me go ahead and
no, there doesn't.
There has to be. So here's the thing, though. If you think that, and I'll tell you where the segregation happens in aerospace and tech. Do you think that there has to be an IQ segregation or a knowledge gap that happens? Do you think that we should just have people with a 90 IQ or 70 IQ in because they're disenfranchised through maybe a lack of education? Do you think we should just let these people go in, thus jeopardizing jobs? And not only this, but safety across the board. Do you think that should be allowed then?
In order to get those jobs, you have to have the degree in the first place.
Oh, so you have to have some kind of merit to get in. You're not just going to, because there have been planes and jets and rocket launches that have failed because of one misplaced screw. Things like common sense. So common sense is like the foundational function that we have in America. So if you're going to apply for a job, why not be more qualified in order to get the job instead of saying, because I just showed up? That's literally what, because I'm a woman and these quotas and shit that we have is just crazy.
Do you think the people with the degrees are the ones that build the rockets?
Wait, was that a question?
Yes. Do you think the people with degrees are the ones that actually physically build the rocket?
I think that it takes some substantial knowledge, and I'm not saying degrees per se, but I think passing a mandatory testing, I would say criteria, things like this, like it takes a degree. There's a filter that has to be done. And whenever you have filters and job requirements, that's segregating and filtering people that should be more qualified to a job and not qualified. I think that that's common sense as a principle.
So, question, like, because of the
police officers that were felons that previously like killed, like that's like, okay, we're gonna eliminate that kind of segregation. That's really bad, bro.
That's not segregation. That is hiring on. Hold on, hiring on merit is not segregation. I'm okay with hiring on merit. The difference between
that is segregation.
No, hiring on merit is not segregation.
Yes, it is. That's a form of segregation. You're wrong if you say it isn't. You're segregating a group. What's the definition of segregation?
Definition of segregation. Hold on, I'll pull it up. Definition. Act of the action or state of setting somebody or something apart from others.
Right. That's segregating a group. If you're going to segregate people who are unqualified from a job, literally that's what it is, bro. Come on, man. Like,
no,
so you have to have
no, it's not. Hold on, because
literally what you just you said it's not the very same thing that you just said in definitionally. You're segregating people who are less qualified for a job. Separating. Let's not even use segregation to describe definitionally what it is. You're separating. You're filtering people who are unqualified for a position, creating a more safe infrastructure, safe environment, safeguards, reducing lawsuits in the time as well too.
No, it's because so with segregation. Segregation specifically is something that you cannot overcome. With a job, if you go in to get the degrees, you can overcome that.
You can overcome it. You can overcome segregation. So hold on. If I applied for the 1992 Olympics and I was segregated because of my poor performance, how do I overcome this? Would training, hard work, and me waiting another 4 years to apply again make me overcome this? And not only this, but do you think that if I got denied a visa to go to the US, but then they filtered through my past and I had good behavior and all this other shit, and I showed my drive to become an American citizen, I can overcome that form of segregation too. You can overcome all kinds of different segregation through merit, through hard work, through sacrifice, things like this. My Unity Through Merit Act actually pushes towards this.
So with your Unity Through Merit Act, when they end up reinstating Jim Crow laws, how are you supposed to get over the segregation there?
So the problem with this is if you have somebody saying we're just going to have Jim Crow laws again, like the mere fact that we know what Jim Crow laws did, and we're not an ignorant, well, actually, we kind of are more of an ignorant civilization ever since we had like phones put in our hand. I think that we're dumbing down as a nation. But to get back to this, I think that because we knew that the Jim Crow laws weren't that far off ago, right? It's more of a recent thing in terms of like, I would say association with present time and past, right? Because we knew what that was and people can identify with that, and people who are legislators were in legislation were probably around at the time or even saw their parents go through this. They're very familiar with this. I think that that's an obvious thing that we would steer clear from when it comes to Jim Crow law. So when you say, well, how are we going to stop the very same thing that's obvious that people don't like? I don't even know how to even answer such an obvious question by them saying that this didn't work in the past, we're not going to do it again.
We literally have multiple people actively in government that have advocated for the return of Jim Crow laws, including somebody on the fucking Supreme Court.
How's that work so far? How's that work so far?
Well, we haven't had a challenge so specifically the person on the Supreme Court, aka Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas has literally stated that if if a case was brought to the court to overturn Brown versus the Board of Education, he would overturn that.
Well, here's the thing, though, is like because we have people which are safeguards. In fact, matter of fact, Clarence Thomas, very familiar with the Civil Rights Act, and then not to mention this, but very, very familiar with Jim Crow laws. You're talking about people that would say, no, we're not going to allow this to happen. Now, granted, there are amendments that do happen all the time, right? This, or even like executive orders that happen all the time. These things happen, but I think that common sense will eventually prevail because we know what the past was, and we know what historical revelations of their outcomes were too. Because we have these outcomes, I would say that your argument would be more substantial and better if the Jim Crow laws never existed. We didn't know what that was, and this was a new thing that we've never experienced. Then I would say your argument would have more merit. But because it's existed, we saw what it did. It was rife with abuse. I don't think we're going to allow it again. And even if we do have this happen again, people are going to fight it naturally and reverse this.
So if it did happen, the only thing that would happen is the people would just end up fighting for the reinstitution of the Civil Rights Act. That because the Civil Rights Act was the natural getting rid of those policies.
Hold on one second.
Do you not see that?
Hold on 1 second real quick. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to fix my volume so that way my my audience can kind of hear this. Apologies, by the way. I didn't. Can you hear me?
We can hear you fine.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to get back on here. I don't know if my audience can hear me now. Apologies for this. I've been having some audio issues, and YouTube's been on the fritz as well, showing like no viewers are watching my channel, which there are because they're all in the comments. Can you repeat your question? Apologies once again for that.
Yeah. So if we did this, you said if they reinstituted Jim Crow laws, then we would just go right back to fighting for the natural abolition of the Jim Crow laws. So people would just turn around and go right back to fighting for the institution of the Civil Rights Act.
No, they wouldn't fight for the. No, what you're talking about is if we eliminate the Civil Rights Act, what you do is you create a void. That void has to be filled with something, and that would be the Unity Through Merit Act. We would go right back to the Unity Through Merit Act. That's what you're implying. So in my hypothetical, that's what would happen. In order for you to say, I want to complain about a system that's rife with abuse, I don't like this system, you have to actually replace it with something of equal or greater value. You would say this, right? This is in nearly all things we can map this onto. Now, that's what I'm saying. That's my offer, is to have this to the Unity Merit Act. If we can replace it with that, that's good. But then in your example, if we don't have anything to replace it with, yes, we'd go back to the Civil Rights Act. But in my diagram that I've also exhibited here, we would go through the Unity Through Merit Act, and that would work. So I think we would end up at something better, which I'm offering, which is going to, like I said, reduce litigation, reduce lawsuits, remove liabilities on companies, and also increase general safety in public. And also education standards would go up too, because if teachers are smarter that are teaching your kids, guess what's going to happen to the student and faculty, right? All those standards are going to go up. Everything's going to follow suit. Everything follows.
Yeah, but again, your Unity Through Merit Act doesn't have any actual protections against segregation, specifically race-based or discrimination. So it would allow for the reinstitution of Jim Crow. So even if
no, it wouldn't necessarily,
even with your policy being in place, they could still reestablish Jim Crow laws, and then we would be right back to fighting for the Civil Rights Act, because there's no actual protections in there for racial discrimination or any form of discrimination.
We do have protections, and these are the protections that I'm offering. So these are expansions that are reducing inequities, right? So I'm going to go ahead and roll this out right now. These are the elements, and I'm using my notes here right now that I wrote down. So this is the framework. We're enacting a modern framework prioritizing individual merit, So these things kind of weed themselves out. Remember how we said that there's a filter that happens at work through certain industries like aerospace, tech, like you have to fulfill certain criteria to get in. You just can't say, well, you just didn't like me because of my race. No, you actually have to qualify for this. And naturally, to be honest with you, this isn't me being racist towards blacks or anybody else like that. Those industries are majority like Caucasian. It's naturally going to happen. It's going to appear on its face that black people are dumber, which isn't the
You just muted yourself on the StreamYard.
Yeah, I've been having mic issues. Can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Let me double check my mic. So this is what I'm saying though. There's a natural segregation that's going to happen right now. If you look at aerospace and other tech industries, they're mostly predominantly going to be through Caucasian people, through white people. Now you can see on its face that there's racism and all this other shit. I mean, look at it. Look at through like the public school system, things like this, through all these other systems. The minorities aren't being educated because they're being given like these DEI teachers and all this. Now going up through I wouldn't even call it a chain of command through the systems. We're going through these tech industry systems. I would say even like where you actually need like real innovation that's going to happen through science, tech, engineering, health, medical. The further you go up, you're going to see like a distinct separation of some kind of race that's going to happen. Mostly predominantly white people. And here's the thing though, naturally, if you look at this, you're going to say, well, damn, they're not hiring black people. When really they're using these merit-based systems to qualify for these jobs because they want to reduce accidents and shit like that. That's going to happen. On its face, that's my whole point. Everything on its face is going to look like racism when it really isn't. These companies, and through my Unity Through Merit Act, we're going to have an advisor, a national advisor with a committee below that. What they're going to do to safeguard these things is double check that they are beholden to these standards that we have, and not saying that because you have to have some non-biased people here, right? So these people are actually employed through the Unity Through Merit Act to oversee these divisions like aerospace, tech, engineering, medical, health, and then through the state, you're also working in conjunction in symbiosis with the state to oversee these to make sure that they are just holding people to these standards, not some racial standards or anything like this. And these are thoroughly vetted and investigated. A lot of the lawsuits through Civil Rights Act, we're so backed up on this. It's like 800, I don't know if it's like 800,000 through the last 3 or 5 years that people are backed up on lawsuits that are just frivolous. In my estimation, most of them are.
Okay. I mean, you're with your Unity Through Merit Act that only focuses on one type of discrimination protections that exist in the Civil Rights Act. So with loans, for example, how do you prevent loan and housing discrimination under that?
So how we can do this through the board of, I don't have a name for it, but like, let's say this board says, okay, we're going to look at numbers. We're going to go ahead and look at numbers and say, all right, in order to eliminate these things that were rife with abuse, like maybe like redlining happened. That was the thing that happened in the past. We're going to say, okay, cool. With these programs, we can say that you're a first-time homeowner, right? Things like this. First-time homeowners, we would say you didn't own a home before, you can apply for this program. These are just numbers that we're looking at because if you own a home before, there's a 1 on your record saying previous homeowner. If you never owned a home before, that's pretty black and white. We're going to just use the system on, paperwork showing that you are a former homeowner, things like this. That's a very obvious standard that we'll have. They're not going to say, well, you're black, so we're just going to give you this home when really you guys were disenfranchised in the past. Slavery is a far thing gone in the past, or because you're an LGBTQ supporter, we're going to give you this. That's bad. I think that if you're LGBTQ and you don't qualify, the white heterosexual male doesn't qualify either. It's the same standard across the board. That's all I'm saying is just holding people to one unified standard. That's it. That's how you can prevent it if you keep people to these standards. That's it.
So that is an hour wrapped up there of open floor. But usually when the conversation's still hot like this, I like to ask, just keeping in mind we still have the 30-minute Q&A. But would both of you want an extra 30 minutes of open floor for this?
Yeah, I don't mind.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. All right. And then I was gonna say, because we've talked about like a lot of different things with this one, and I was maybe gonna ask like what like before like you guys keep going on, maybe what would be like your strongest principled reason like for why the Civil Rights Act should be either repealed or preserved? Like what's the like core problem that your position's gonna solve that the others won't?
I can go real quick. I think that this system should be gutted as far as the Civil Rights Act. Like we can say that, okay, this framework can be removed, but it has to be replaced with something. What I'm offering is replacement value here. So if you think about this, like I'm literally making people beholden to standards of qualification that don't apply to race, which can be used against the other person, don't apply to like sex and gender, which could be reversed against somebody. My opponent here has stated that there's no such thing as reverse discrimination, basically. I'm like, that's ridiculous because discrimination can be used against an oppressor class. Like that's happened over time. I've demonstrated this through the domestic violence cases that I brought up, things like that with perceived victim classes and things like that with police. So if we think about this, my strongest argument is saying that I'm offering a replacement value to something that's being used to be weaponized in the inverse, saying that it eliminates this, makes things neutral on both sides, and also there's oversight with a committee that's viewing this to like I would say a premise of just numbers, stats, things like actuality, like previous homeowner, not previous homeowners. There has to be a distinction, a line drawn in the sand to where it's not being abused by anybody. And not only this, but I'm offering a committee and oversight that works in symbiosis with the state to replace what we have right now, because what we have right now is not working. We have 800,000 cases for the last 3 to 5 years backed up that lawyers can't even untangle because of like the vagueness of Civil Rights Act right now. My Unity Through Merit Act eliminates this and says, hey, clear cut and cross the board. There's going to be discrimination, not discrimination, but segregation that happens, but it's through merit. That's all I'm offering. And that replaces what we have right now.
Yeah. So, I mean, what my plan actually accounts for that his doesn't is literally segregation. I mean, you heard it himself. He's okay with segregation happening. I mean, if we got rid of the Civil Rights Act, we would have multiple layers of segregation again. It would allow for the reinstitution of Jim Crow laws, which is exactly the point that I've been making for the past like 15 to 20 minutes. Yeah.
You have to allow people to fail. In order for people to get better, they have to fail. You can't keep saving people, because if you save people, they handicap them. The public cries all the time when Goldman and Sachs gets bailed out because they're going to be bankrupt, or some industry or company and the government comes in and bails them out. When the common man is failing all the time, nobody comes in and swoops them out. Well, what this actually does is embolden personal business owners, races, and people from communities to actually get better, because failure drives success. Believe it or not the inverse. Success doesn't help with failure. So that's what I'm offering, is like the inverse of this. You have to allow people to fail. What you're doing is handicapping people by giving them infinite repeats and infinite retries. In order for us to get better, we have to learn from these mistakes we make. You're never going to learn from a mistake if you get bailed out and you're not being put to some merit-based system. It's not ever going to happen like this. Matter of fact, I think that that's what the downfall of society has included, with people not being put to a standard of hard work and discipline. Our nation's lost this. So when it comes to the system, I'm going to wrap this up real quick. When it comes to our system's future, our country's future, the reason why we're going downhill is because we're not put to a certain standard that we were once beholden to as a united American society. We're now allowed to get free, infinite get out of jail passes and cards when it comes to education, when it comes to aerospace, technology, engineering. That's why other nations are beating the shit out of us right now because of this.
Yeah. So, I mean, claiming that banning discrimination is not allowing people to basically pull themselves up by the bootstrap, which is basically what you just said, is actually absurd. When we allow people to openly discriminate and allowing the government to openly make laws for enforcing discrimination again, which is what your proposal would do. It's not preventing people from pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. It's putting minorities in a place where they can't pull themselves up, where they can't make their life better because they're degraded down to lesser beings again.
You have to, how does evolution work according to these evo sciences, which I don't really partake in and believe in? In order for us to evolve in the way I'm talking about evolution is like a way of failing to success and learning. You can't ever have a society that is given everything and handed everything. There's never going to be growth from that. Actually, you're handicapping future societies from doing this. The pulling up through bootstraps is going to happen if people are down in their low runs of society. People are going to be good-natured in their premise, and this is an assumptive claim I'm going to make right now, is that I don't think that people want more degradation in society. People that are good, wholesome, hardworking Christian men, these people do exist in society, are going to want to help their fellow brother and say, you know what, you need to toughen up and get these standards up and holding people to certain standards. But guess what's going to happen? You're going to have a great filtration. We're going to call it the great filtration that's going to happen in society where people are failing. And yes, you're going to have a lot of people failing. And there's going to be a destitute class of people that's going to happen because now all of a sudden you have to work hard. Now, there's going to be a lot of people who aren't given handouts. They're going to suffer. Yes, I think that that's good for the soul. Suffering is good for the soul because in order to harden yourself as a man and to toughen yourself and to acclimate to a system, you have to increase your standards to acclimate. What we're doing is acclimating to a handicapped person's system and saying, I need give me's the whole time and giving handouts the whole time. Now we have a less safe society, less bolstered infrastructure, and other nations are beating the shit out of us because of this. To me, it's a nonsensical claim that you're making by saying we shouldn't allow people to fail. That's crazy. This is the very means of how you have a productive society, by allowing people to fail so that way they can get better.
So allowing discrimination and segregation is just allowing people to fail?
Allowing segregation as far as like standards and merit should happen. That happens at every job entry level position to some degree. It's going to happen. So when you say that definitionally, the definition you brought up is like separating people, right? Or separating, I would say even ideologies. There's a segregation that happens. There's an entry or I would say a competency level that has to happen. That's segregation right there. But we can't have like a free-for-all where anybody can just get into any position. Anybody can be anything, whatever they want to be. No, you have to bust your ass and work fucking hard. America used to have a premise to where it's like, in order for you to get into this country, in order for you to get a job, you have to fucking work your ass off. We've fallen as a nation because we've lost these standards. We've far gone these standards. And not only this, but Civil Rights Act, going back to the whole prompt, this is rightful abuse. We've weaponized this against the very same people that have we've said to protect us against these things. I think that this is bad. That's the reverse discrimination I'm talking about. Discrimination is going to happen on every level when it comes to jobs to some degree. You're going to have a separation of merit-based quotas with people, right? To me, that makes sense. But to have quotas on sex, like because we have to have like a certain level of women working for the police force, that doesn't make sense. And not only this, but it's been weaponized by the LGBTQ community, all this other shit. That's just bad, man.
Yeah, but like as we've established, it would be like I agreed we could have a merit-based system law, and that would be fine. But the problem is with instituting that and then removing the Civil Rights Act is it removes the protections from discrimination. You could get rid of you could gerrymander out the right to vote for Black people again. You could, you can proceed to start discriminating on fucking loans again. You can discriminate on housing again. There are a lot of different protections in the Civil Rights Act that have nothing to do with what you're talking about. Your merit-based approach is more of an address towards affirmative action and DEI, and then is the Civil Rights Act. literally has nothing to do with the Civil Rights Act.
That has a lot to do. That has a lot to do with the Civil Rights Act, because if we're talking about the Civil Rights Act, we have to talk about the supporting functions of civil rights. If we're talking about DEI, we're talking about discrimination, race-based relations. If we're talking about civil rights, we're talking about affirmative action. All these things, they bolster civil rights. And if absent any of this other stuff, it's like civil rights is almost empty as a framework to some degree, right? But we've since bolstered the Civil Rights Act with all these other things. I think that we should gut the system. We should go back to a black and white approach, no pun intended, when it comes to like some form of segregation through merit-based actions. That's why my Unity Through Merit-Based Act works really well, actually. I think that if we can have this and have, I would say, a more non-biased committee, not even more non-biased, but a non-biased committee that we outsource that's, I would say, external to the group of committee that we have. And these people are vetted and they work in symbiosis with the state. They basically clear this and they make sure that Arizona, Pennsylvania, everybody else is upholded to these standards, to the Unity Through Merit Act is good. I think that's better. We don't have that through the Civil Rights Act. Not only do we not have this, but we're going to have more legal cases of reverse discrimination, which you say doesn't exist, which is crazy for you to even say that reverse discrimination is not a thing. That's insane.
Yeah, but like I said again, your merit-based system, it fills the gaps of the Civil Rights Act, but removing the gaps from the Civil Rights Act reopens new gaps.
No, it doesn't open new gaps. What it does is it closes a lot of gaps that are usually taken advantage of, because the problem with your Civil Rights Act that you have is it's too broad, right? Not only is it too broad, but it's too gray area-ish. Now, what this does is it makes it more black and white, cut and dry, which reduces gaps, actually. Not only this, but it's it's full of outdated elements and enacts a modern framework through my Unity Through Merit Act, prioritizing individual merit, socioeconomical need, and narrow anti-discrimination rules. Like, here are the anti-discrimination rules that you're talking about. These are the gaps that would fill. No identity quotas. We don't have identity quotas. Eliminate that. Get that out of the fucking way. That's not in the
Civil Rights Act. That's not in the Civil Rights Act. That was an affirmative action law.
Does that not bolster civil rights?
No, it is okay.
Umbrella of civil rights, and then not to mention this, but
this goes back to a question.
Expansions of the law. It allows for no vague expansions, makes things more clear and white. So not only this, merit-based opportunities with socioeconomical preferences like income, geography, for equity without reverse bias. Reverse bias happens all the time. So here are also the solutions too. I'm offering mentorship, biased adults, community programs for cohesion. These are things that I'll enact too. Reduce litigation via clear definitions and exemptions. If we have these, that closes up all the gaps you're talking about.
Okay. Again, this goes back to the question that I asked you earlier, which is, what is the difference between being proactive and being reactive?
Okay. Do you want me to repeat what I told you when you asked that? Because I can.
You don't need to repeat it. Okay. So when we go into the difference between being proactive and being reactive, the Civil Rights Act is a reactive law. It is only enforceable as a reaction. Things like affirmative action, things like DEI, those are proactive policies.
So hold on. I think that Unity Through Merit Act is both. And I can explain why.
No, it's purely proactive.
No, it's not proactive. I think the Unity Through Merit Act is a reaction to civil rights. So what I mean to say, the reason why you're wrong about this is because it's literally replacing the predecessor that's failed before it, which is a reactive measure, mind you. If I'm replacing that, that's a reaction to civil rights, mind you. The thing where also it's one and the same when we say it's proactive, like you said, it's also proactive too. The reason why it's reactive too is because it's replacing something. In order to have something replaced, it's a reaction to its predecessor before. Both things. Just describe that to you.
Okay. But Okay, you can say it's a reaction by replacing its predecessor.
That's
That
the
is
reaction.
that is the reaction element of it.
So
But
it is
as
reactive too.
uh, eh, whenever
It is.
whenever it's actually implemented, it would be purely a proactive law. So it would attempt to prevent certain types. It would basically attempt to prevent DEI and affirmative action, which would make it a proactive law in its entirety.
So that's where you're wrong. It's not an attempt. It does replace this. Actually, it is a replacement. So if we're thinking about this, I just gave you the framework on prioritizing individual merit. So that's not an attempt. We've seen this before. We've seen examples of this all the time. If I'm going to apply for an aerospace job and I don't have a degree, but I apply and I pass all the standardized tests and everything else like this, that's one example where we see not an attempt, but an example, a demonstration of how this works. We can then map this on to the Unity Through Merit-Based Act and say, in order for you to be a teacher at this school, in order for you to operate this business, you can deny people by not infringing on your religious principles and rights because you're LGBTQ, and us having to acclimate to your reverse discrimination, which that's really what that is. I think that we can create a society that functions fair, firm, and across the board, because now we have oversight. Not only do we have oversight, but think about it like this. If we reduce the litigation and costs and lawsuits and throughout society, we're now saving more money that could be used to go to this committee that can have oversight through individual states working in symbiosis to prevent this reverse discrimination. Now we have more funding because it's free now available, instead of being the cost being drained because of the system and frivolous lawsuits through reverse discrimination.
Okay. But in your system, how do you prevent discrimination?
So, as I've defined before, discrimination is going to happen regardless. Now, here's the thing that I'll even describe, because we're going to get into this because I need to flesh this out, because optics wise, it doesn't sound really good. But once I describe this, it's going to make more sense. If you're going to apply for an aerospace job, a teacher program, or anything else, there has to be a clear delineation of, like, here's the entry level. Or even for me to qualify, there has to be qualifiers. Meaning, like, I passed the standardized test, meaning like the company has brochures saying that we do not promote LGBTQ belief systems because, as Christianity, 2,000 years of unchanging principles that we've had, we're not going to acclimate to your views in society. Like the Mormon example you've given me, if they believe that blacks can't be a part of their religion, I'm not going to fight that. They can believe whatever they want to, because that's clearly black and white. That's a form of discrimination that's going to exist. Whether you can't force people not to discriminate when it comes to standards of employment, when it comes to bakeries, saying I'm not baking a cake for a lesbian couple, things like this, all across the board, discrimination is going to happen. That's why you have these lawsuits with Civil Rights Act, because people feel discriminated. So it happens even with Civil Rights Act.
So you believe that it's okay for somebody to take their personal beliefs and use that to discriminate against somebody because of immutable characteristics?
Do you think being lesbian is an immutable characteristic?
Yes and no, because you can be bi.
What you've demonstrated is that there's a broadness with Civil Rights Act. There's no black and white distinction. That means because I feel I should sue one day, I shouldn't the next. So because of your gray area overall generality that you're having right now, the broadness, now I nip that in the bud. It's no longer black and white. I mean, it's black and white, and it's no longer like too broad. I've now narrowed this down through, like, okay, we understand that I can't change your religion. That's what you believe. I'll go to another shop to make a cake. Like, and then the way that you frame this is pretty sneaky. You said we're forcing people to change what they're doing. No, it's the opposite that's happening. The lesbian couple that's coming in is trying to tell the Christian bakery to make cakes for them and change what their religion is. That's reversal, inverse. So the opposite is happening, actually. This happens with employment. This happens with religion and everything else. My Merit Through Unity Act eliminates all this shit. I'm talking about common sense, bro. This is just common sense shit. That's it.
Though the whole point of having anti-discrimination laws is to prevent people from using their personal ideologies, which is what religion is. It is a personal ideology to discriminate against people for immutable characteristics.
So is being a corn star an immutable characteristic? I want to
No.
answer. Okay, it's not, right? That's another belief system. So when you say things like the lesbian, it kind of is and isn't. You see how indecisive you were with that? Now let's make it more decisive. You say that that is
the reason. There's a reason I said yes and no is because technically, like being lesbian in and of itself or being gay in and of itself is technically an immutable characteristic. However, you can be bi and be in a lesbian. You can be bi and be in a lesbian relationship, and that makes it not a immutable characteristic because in that case you're choosing to be in that lesbian relationship.
No, they're all choices in my belief, but that's a whole nother debate we can have later on. But in order to, let's go down my train of logic. So you say that being a corn star isn't an immutable characteristic, but this corn star.
No, a job is not an immutable characteristic.
Right. But so this lesbian wants to be a minister at a church. And she says that, well, you have to accept me no matter what, even though Christianity says that we can't do that. Should she sue the church because they're not making her a minister at her parish when there's an opening available? Should she be able to sue?
If they're making that decision because of the fact that she is a lesbian, then yes.
Yeah. She
because
should
that is
sue.
an immutable. Because that is an immutable characteristic, yes.
So she should sue because Christianity doesn't want a lesbian pastor because of our belief system that we've had unchanged for 2,000 years.
Because they're choosing to discriminate based off an immutable characteristic, then yes.
This is insane, bro. So hold on. Do you think the inverse can happen? Let's say that because I believe that the LGBTQ, we're going to reverse this real quick. I just want to see where your logic is. There's a lesbian society, right? And they have a school and there's an indoctrination. Do you think that a Christian can go into their program and sue them because they're not adapting to Christian ethics at all?
If they could, you'd have to give me a more
So the Christian goes to like, let's say there's a lesbian school and they say, you know what, all we have is like lesbians because we feel ostracized by the community. We have this ideological belief system and we have rainbow flags all over the place, but a Christian applies this. I don't know why a Christian would apply, but in this hypothetical, a Christian applies because it's the closest school, the closest charter school, and they don't want to drive any further, but they want to get a formal education and they go to the school and they say, hey, listen, I like praying during lunch hours. Not only that, but I like bringing my Bible to school. I won't force it on you guys. But the lesbian community says, no, that book is hopefully against what we believe. We're not going to have you at our school. We're not going to have you apply at our school. Drive further. Do you think the Christian can sue the school?
That would still be discrimination. So yes.
Do you see what you just created now? Now you created a society to where there's no solution, where people can reverse this back and forth, creating a never-ending cycle to where there's no delineation. It's too broad. What the Immunity Through Merit Act does, it eliminates this and says, you know what? There's not only stopgaps, but also safeguards. It says you will not change the Christian fundamental practices of this business over 2,000 years. You should be able to go create your own business through merit, and not only this and hard work. If you want your own school, a charter school, a lesbian school, create your own society. I would promote that. Not only does this promote better entrepreneurship in the nation, but it also incentivizes people to be better through failing. And also there's so much you could read into this. It's ridiculous.
I mean, the whole reason for that is because discrimination can go multiple ways. You can discriminate against religious people. You can discriminate against people with immutable characteristics like race, gender, or sexual identity. Discrimination goes multiple different ways. All your system that you want to implement if we were to remove the Civil Rights Act and purely institute that, it only focus is all. It doesn't even prevent discrimination in any way, shape, or form.
What you're preventing is a free market society where people are allowed to create their own businesses through failure. I think that when you have the allowance of people to fail their way to success, it creates a better society. But when you have people create too much overreach in having to change your whole business practices, like I brought up in the extreme hypothetical of this Russian restaurant that creates like bratwurst and all this other stuff, and through maybe I would say a lesbian comes in that's a vegan, changes their whole menu because they're going to sue them into oblivion. You've now changed the culture of the restaurant. You've now changed the traditions of the restaurant and everything else. That's abuse. What you're allowing for is a system that's rife with abuse. Through my Unity Through Merit Act, we understand that this culture has to be intact. You can't destroy the core principles of this culture, their traditions. We can trace back their lineage through Russian heritage. That's literally the namesake of this bratwurst company that we've had that has originated through Russian culture and shit like that. Not only do we enact this, but you also allow a free market of choice for people to create their own businesses and operate underneath their belief systems that aren't hampered. What you're allowing is a lot of overreach and people just sue people in oblivion because they won't change their core belief systems or structures. I think that this is bad. This is horrific, actually.
So you think people's opinions are more important than people's immutable characteristics?
They are opinions, but these are fundamental beliefs that have also kept traditions from to survive throughout society as well too. Remember, let's get back to the prompt here too. Should we get rid of the Civil Rights Act? I think that there's too much overreach that happens that erodes traditions, erodes culture, erodes society. Mind you, also businesses also have culture there as well too. If I'm applying at a business, I have to adapt to their culture. I have to acclimate to their culture that they have at their business. If I'm a debater on Speakeasy's channel, I'm not going to attack kids. That's one of the core fundamental principles that they have. Him and his wife have said previously that you shouldn't attack kids. Now, if they say, well, you've attacked people's kids, now I'm going to sue them for discrimination because they have a standard that I'm not beholden to. No, it doesn't work like that. Just like Manure has said before, well, you should pay these people, even though you set up these microphones, you've paid for all these frameworks that you've had, you've taken all the time to produce the production of this show, but you should pay the debaters. You see how that's reverse? What Menard just did, like in the Donkey of the Day, mind you. So also, this is a reversal. This is bad. You should, in order for you to actually have a debate program and get money, guess what Manure has to do? He has to actually have him pull the cart instead of the donkey, develop his own debate platform, and now you have a free market of competing debate channels. That's way better. That's a solution. That's my Unity Through Merit-Based Act. What you're offering is that we're just going to sue people through frivolous acts, and Manure's going to be right one week, and then Speakeasy is going to be right the next. This is bullshit. And map onto race, sex, gender, and now you just multiplied this and create more hardships to where it's like people are just suing just because of feels. This is bad.
Yeah, I mean, but it's pretty clear that you're okay with discrimination. So
there is. How do you stop? Like you've even said before. Well, it's clear we can't stop discrimination because even under the Civil Rights Act, people are suing each other. Well, of course, they're going to do this. They're going to weaponize this against each other.
Yeah, hold on, but if under the Civil Rights Act, if you discriminate against somebody, you can either A, go to jail, depending on the severity and like the repeated counts, or B, or B, you end up having to pay that person a fuckload of money, just like Disney had to do with the fucking Mandalorian actor. That is discouraging discrimination.
So what discourages discrimination is back to what I was saying, and I'll even give you the example of two competing platforms that you're going to have right now, is you're allowing a free market society to where people can then compete against your business. If I want to compete against Speakeasy's channel, I now have to do man hours, a fuck ton of work in order to compete against him, build my sub count, which is shitty right now. Like compared to him, the guy's a fucking legend when it comes to developing a debate platform that stomped the shit out of Raging Potato. But back to this, when you think about this, in order for me to do this, it seems like a monumental task, but at one time it was to him. And now he has this fucking glorious channel that you and I can debate against each other with these ideals. And in order for us to create a fair market society, we can't sue Speakeasy into oblivion because I can just make up the fact that I'm black and he's just not going to pay me because I'm on his plantation. Like, you see what I'm saying? I can just make up shit as I go. In order to create a free market society, in order for me to demonstrate my competency, in order to challenge Speakeasy, I have to meet him where he's at by creating my own platform and doing this through my own merit and busting my fucking ass, building subscribers and doing this. That's a good example. But guess what's going to happen? That was a form of discrimination, but it allowed for free market society to where I can have hard work and compete against him. That's a society I want, not a society of frivolous Disney lawsuits that happen. That all that does is create a society full of resentment. That's bad.
How does allowing for discrimination to be enforced via laws, because we remove the legal protections, encourage the free market?
It encourages the free market, like I've said. So you're allowing people to fail because if you don't have the merit, if you don't meet the standards that we set in the criteria, guess what's going to happen? There's no fucking bailouts, no get out of jail free cards, things like this. And guess what that does? It ends up handicapping people. It ends up deterring hard work. It ends up a society less incentivized through merit and hard work. I think that when you have this ideology, you don't embolden people to work hard anymore. You embolden people to use their color as a coat and as a costume, as lesbianism or any kind of LGBTQ requirement to undermine the system of which you used to weaponize against the oppression of your class. You can now reverse this. Uno reverse. Back again. There's no solution. You've even cited yourself that Civil Rights Act. Even under this, there's lawsuits back and forth. You have no solution. Meanwhile, I do through the Unity Through Merit Act. I do.
All righty. That right there is going to wrap up the open back and forth. Great exchange from both sides tonight. Where we're going to get into now is the final phase of the debate, the closing statements. Okay. But before we get into that, quick reminder to the live chat. The Q&A form is already up there, so if you've got a question for either debater, make sure you drop them in now. But remember, Super Chats, PayPal, Cash App questions do take priority, and if they fill up the whole 30 minutes, not all the free chat questions are going to make it through. So if there's something you really want guaranteed to be asked, send it through one of those priority options. With that being said, we're going to move into closings. Each debater is going to have 5 minutes to make their final case. All right. So we're going to start with Marte, and that'll give Vigilante the last word. So, Marte, whenever you're ready for your closing statement, I will start the timer up with your voice.
So I'll end to say this. I appreciate you, Vigilante, for meeting me on the battlegrounds of Speakeasy's illustrious platform that he has put his blood, sweat, and fucking tears to design, build. I don't even know. I can't even assume to know the man hours it took to even create like the lightning in the background, the designs, all this shit to source all the music, everything else that he's done to create this platform. I don't even know. I can't even fathom this. But for me to be on his platform and say, you should give me a handout for just showing up to the game, or for me to clap because I like the movie, I should get ticket funding when I leave the theater, is really bad, because this is what, under the Civil Rights Act, you're actually promoting. What I'm promoting is, like, let's say me and Speakeasy have a beef, which I don't think would probably ever happen because I don't talk shit about people's kids. So because I abide by his policies and his mandates that he has, and I recognize this, that's going to discriminate people that like to talk about kids from being on his platform. Discrimination is going to happen. We agree on this. So what I'm saying is, you're saying this overarching premise of saying we're just going to eliminate discrimination. That's bad. Well, that's an absolute statement to make. You can't eliminate this, because guess what? Hiring mandates is a form of discrimination. When we think about standardized testing, that's a form of discrimination. When we talk about this, not only this, but discrimination is going to happen, but there's more abuse under Civil Rights Act than anything else. What I want is standardized testing, like even that is an example, to be mapped onto other things. Now, back to religion, I think that your whole premise of saying that Christianity should acclimate to the LGBTQ criteria and just say we should allow this is just allowing more subversion. The same thing if we give the example of Manure getting onto this debate channel and then Speakeasy bows down, kowtows to him and says, you know what, you're right, I should just give you money. Well, that's kind of disrespectful because Manure doesn't know the man hours that went into his program, the effort that went into all this, and all the subscribers that have put a lot of man hours just watching and vetting his criteria, because if they think that his program's shit, they're going to boycott, which is going to happen inevitably if things are fraught with abuse. That's a decision that can happen. That's what the lesbian couple could do to the church. They could boycott the church. There's other things that can happen. If you don't like something, don't participate in it, because we vote with our dollars. If you're not going to vote with your dollars, you're not going to support said business. You're going to cut off the lifeblood. If these viewers that monitor these debates on Speakeasy's platform don't like his merit-based performance of creating this infrastructure, look at this. The design that he created, the Swords of Reason, just coming up with the name, the production, him having to send us messages to sign up to StreamYard, all this other shit. That's him doing this, not his assistant, not anybody else. But that's disrespectful for me to ask for money when I didn't put in on any of this. That's crazy. Speakeasy, it's because I'm black. And yeah, it's because I'm black. Just give me my money, bro. Like, this is fucking stupid. Like, it really is. That's your whole argument. It's like we should just sue each other into oblivion because of feels before reals. And my act creates a free market society and adds to that and incentivizes people through merit-based programs to work hard. And not only this, but I've also that replaces what we have right now, gutting that system, replacing a committee with oversight at the state level that works hand in hand in symbiosis to ensure that this non-biased approach beholdens people to this measure. And not only this, but if you don't pass, you don't get in. And this isn't through color. This isn't through race preference or any of this shit. This is through works. Through works alone, you'll get in, and faith too, because faith without works is dead. What I'm doing is a conflation of the two. You should have faith that you should fail your way to success. You shouldn't have faith that you should get handouts to success, because all you're doing is handicapping yourself as a minority that will never progress in society. We can even look over in Speakeasy's neck of the woods. He's in Canada right now. The indigenous people have been given handouts for a minute. Their IQ levels have plummeted through the fucking basement. They're now more in trailer park homes than anything else right now. Their education levels haven't increased. These are all handouts. Well, because they said, well, we were oppressed at one point. Now it's like, well, shit, they need to get off their asses and fucking work. Yes, it sounds harsh. It sounds harsh as shit. But your Manures of the world, everybody else that gets here and says that they want a handout is bad because of, of my race, because of my creed or anything like that. No, fucking work for it, man. You should not wear your race or anything else, your creed, your religion, as a shield. Hard work is the mainstay of the day, and that's why Christianity reigns supreme, because you have to work hard. That delineates character from anything else. Hard work, man. That's all I'm saying.
All right. Thank you for that closing statement, Marte. And with that, we're going to hand the mic over to Vigilante. Vigilante, whenever you're ready for your closing statement, I will start the timer up with your voice.
Yeah, so you talked about a lot about frivolous lawsuits. Preventing frivolous lawsuits is kind of fucking stupid, honestly. I mean, when it comes down to lawsuits, I mean, you could sue, like we mentioned, you could sue anybody for literally anything. So just preventing frivolous lawsuits on just the aspect of discrimination or is really fucking stupid when you can already sue somebody for literally fucking anything. You can sue somebody because they fucking stepped on your toe. It's a pointless act. Because whenever it comes down to a civil lawsuit, you still have to have evidence in order to actually succeed in having the lawsuit. Whenever it comes down, if you want to waste your money and pay the courts and pay into our justice system to fucking sue somebody for a pointless fucking reason, go for it. Nobody fucking cares. You're wasting your own fucking money. Now, you also talked about how you heavily implied that ideas are more important than protecting immutable characteristics, which is absurd. Like, we shouldn't allow corporations or government entities to discriminate on somebody because of their immutable characteristics. Immutable characteristics are by far more important than people's fucking ideals. It, like when the government back during World War II threw the Japanese into internment camps because they were strictly because of the fact that they were Japanese, that wasn't a good thing. That wasn't something that should have been allowed to happen. That is something that would have been prevented by the Civil Rights Act. We talked a lot about how DEI and affirmative action have been abused as a gap because it's a gap within the laws of the Civil Rights Act, because the Civil Rights Act is broad. Yeah, I can agree the Civil Rights Act is broad. I can agree that DEI and affirmative action have been abused, but throwing the baby out with the bathwater isn't the fucking solution to fixing these gaps. Yeah, we can institute a merit-based system on top of the Civil Rights Act, which would be completely and totally fine. But getting rid of the Civil Rights Act would only allow for people to go back to discriminating based on immutable characteristics. It would allow for the return of Jim Crow laws. And somehow preventing discrimination is apparently preventing failure, which makes literally no fucking sense. When the whole goal that both of us want here is to put people on a level playing field, and what the Civil Rights Act does and what preventing discrimination does is put everybody on a level playing field. Because without the Civil Rights Act, and when you allow things like the Jim Crow laws, by not having the Civil Rights Act, you take away that level playing field, because then people are separated based on their immutable characteristics. So while I can see that your merit-based approach is instituted with the intent of leveling the playing field, it fails to do that because it fails to prevent discrimination. Discrimination is the key point of the Civil Rights Act, preventing discrimination. Whether we're talking about the Title I, Title II, Title IX, it doesn't fucking matter. The whole point is to prevent discrimination. Whether it's discrimination on jobs, whether it's discrimination on housing, whether it's discrimination on loans, whether it's discrimination on schooling. And we didn't even talk about how the fact of how even with these gaps, there are still plenty of instances of institutionalized discrimination, because we still allow for loan discrimination through things like subprime loans. We didn't even talk about how after the Civil Rights Act, we still had things like redlining, which were used to put Black communities in certain areas and continue housing discrimination, which is what allowed for the continuation of education discrimination, because Black people are in these lower income areas and we fund our schools via property taxes instead of actual real fucking taxes. The schools in minority communities and low income communities end up being worse. So we still allow for these certain types of discrimination. And is that a gap in the Civil Rights Act? Yes, but that's not a gap that would be fixed by your policy.
And thank you for that closing statement. That is going to wrap up the closing statements. Great work from both debaters tonight. Listen, if you're enjoying what you're seeing, make sure you like the stream, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the debates we host here on Swords of Reason. Again, we run all kinds of matchups, political debates, cultural, social issues, philosophy, trending topics, internet beefs, literally anything there's a conversation worth clashing over. We bring it into the arena, so don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of that. And also, don't forget to subscribe to tonight's debaters as well. Their links are in the description. Make sure you show them some support for stepping into the arena tonight and sharpening their arguments in front of us all. And before I start the timer for the chat Q&A, I usually like to ask a question or two for each side based on arguments I heard, things I may want cleared, things I think deserve a second pass, stuff of that nature. And once those questions are answered, we'll get into the official Q&A. And then also after the Q&A, we have the Chaos and Chill panel for anyone in the chat. I see some really antsy people in the chat tonight, so we are doing an open panel, so make sure you stick around for that after. So my first questions, I'm going to actually start with the negative. So I'm going to start with you, Vigilante. At what point does enforcing like anti-discrimination laws require like race conscious policies? Like how do you prevent those from becoming discrimination in a different form, like we've heard tonight about the reverse discrimination?
Yeah, so how you prevent things like DEI from becoming discrimination in and of themselves is literally just through the Civil Rights Act. That's why I brought up in my opening statement the fact that when white people have brought discrimination lawsuits all the way up to the Supreme Court, every single time they have won. The Civil Rights Act applies regardless of what race you are. So when we have the Civil Rights Act already prevents for this.
Okay, and did you have anything for that, Marte? And I wasn't laughing at your answer. If you saw me chuckle there, I was laughing at Trench in the chat, just so you know.
Well, I'll say this: the problem with his whole premise is I've not once said we're gonna just absolutely, like an absolute claim of eliminate discrimination. Discrimination is gonna happen at any level, regardless. You have to have qualifiers, like you have to have people actually qualify for a position, things like this. You're gonna have segregation. What I'm offering is benevolent segregation. That's what I'm offering. And through the benevolent segregation, meaning like there's standards that are universal, meaning like in order for you to get in this company, he's espoused things like, these frivolous lawsuits. What those are alluding to is creating more safety measures for companies, things like this. Entry levels to where it's like your company's image is now bolstered by competency instead of ineptitude. That's what I'm offering now, is that you can never get rid of discrimination. He said that my position is like to get rid of this. You can't do this because there's benevolent discrimination that's going to happen through company mandates that are through requirements, which are common sense. These principles need to happen because it promotes safety as well, too. Other things, too. But yeah.
Okay. And so for my next question for you, Vigilante, is if the Civil Rights Act like guarantees an equal protection, how would we like explain like the persistent disparities that happen between the groups still? And like, does that, it's kind of a two-part, does that indicate limits in what legislation can actually even achieve?
So the reason we still see the disparities is because there are, in fact, gaps in the Civil Rights Act. We have that's the whole reason why we had to like have the Voting Rights Act after the Civil Rights Act to bolster the Civil Rights Act. Not all of the gaps in the Civil Rights Act have been filled. A big reason for that is because some things just cannot be fully legislated out. Like you can't just have a blanket ban on discrimination because it's a very wide thing. It's not something you can solidly define outside of just prejudice against certain groups. So it puts a forcible policies on discrimination, but there is still going to be acts of discrimination. But the difference being, because of the Civil Rights Act, you actually have recourse if you're discriminated against. Whereas if we get rid of the Civil Rights Act, you have no recourse.
So I brought up some stats real quick just to kind of counter that a little bit. White individuals make up the majority of the workplace in aerospace, engineering, and related science in the United States. So since we have these numbers, I'll bring this up. Workforce representation, white individuals comprise approximately of 69.3% to 71.2% of the aerospace engineering workforce. Because there's a disparity that exists, do you think we should allow more blacks who don't qualify for these jobs just to balance the numbers?
No, I would say that we should, and hold on, let me finish. I would say that we should make education more accessible for everyone. So if black people want to go into things like aerospace engineering, they actually have the means and ability to access aerospace engineering.
Okay, great.
So the way that we would want to do that is not by affirmative action. The way that we would need to do that is by policies like free college.
So more handouts. So here's the thing, though, is if we have more competent teachers getting into positions because we raise standards of quality of education, meaning like the bar for teachers to actually become teachers is raised a little bit higher, and we're not just allowing anybody to be a teacher because of their race, creed, or whatever this is by wearing these coats and jackets and costumes. They have to actually qualify for these positions. Do you think those standards would be raised up to where most people that are now minorities in these public schools will now have a better opportunity because they have better education?
No, because that fails to address the primary problem whenever it comes to getting higher education, which is funding. So whenever we talk about low-income communities in general, improving the quality of teaching in the low-income communities, yeah, it's a good thing, but it doesn't fully address the problem. You still have to address the problem of lack of access due to lack of money, in which is where you need policies like free college in order to help fix that gap.
So you're not allowing people to fail. That's what you're saying.
No, having free college doesn't mean everybody gets in. It actually, usually if you actually look at the countries that do have free college, which is literally everybody in the developed world except fucking America, those countries usually have stricter standards on getting into college because of the fact that it is publicly funded.
So do you think that we need stricter standards to get into college?
If we were to institute free college, yes.
So, okay, let's say college is free. You still think we should have stricter standards to get into college?
Yes, which is where you were talking about a second.
Well, welcome aboard to the Unity through Merit-Based Acts. All right, stricter standards across the board. This isn't through college. This is through other industries as well, too. This is a clear delineation of a black and white standard that we need to set. You see how that just eliminates this broadness to where now we are increasing safety. And if we map this onto other industries like aerospace and everything else, because you never had a solution for balancing the scales as far as aerospace. And we whittled this down to public education. And now you're going back to my premise of standards and holding these standards to where people can get in. But I mean, the handouts, you're going to have handouts regardless to some degree, but it's the standards that we're talking about, the merit-based actions that I'm alluding to.
Yeah, the increasing the standards and increasing like the education in low income communities is an important part of fixing that, but it is equally as important as increasing access through things like free college, so that low income communities can actually afford to go to college.
Okay, so let's say even if I concede that standards are going to go up, which means that you're not going to have everybody and anybody teaching your son, which means you're going to have more qualified people. You're going to have more qualified people in other industries that are rife with, I would say, the oversight. I just had a podcast where we had Mark Selbeck, the Star of Deadliest Catch, on, one of many celebrities who was going to be on my podcast. He has a big safety protocol, which means there's a lot of discrimination on his ship. If you fuck up on his ship, he's breaking your jaw. He literally said on the podcast, that's a form of discrimination. Well, because you're a jeopardy to the safety of everybody else on the ship, that's a form of discrimination that has to exist no matter what. I think we've foregone this old time approach that has been consistent on creating standards of safety with OSHA and everything else, where there's like standards that we have to be beholden to. Now, granted, if you want to bolster this with free education, whatever, that's a whole different argument. What I'm talking about is just raising the standards so that way we as a society can be more competitive with other countries. Right now, we're getting our asses kicked by everybody else industry-wise, and I think that's bad.
And I've never refuted that raising standards is a bad thing. Raising standards is a good thing, but raising standards is not a catch-all that fixes all of these problems.
It mostly fixes a lot of shit, especially when we make things more black and white and less broad-based.
We would literally be making things more black and white. You'd have more black people at the bottom and more white people at the top. Quite literally.
We have that right now in aerospace with 67% of white people who got in through merit through aerospace because they're going to reduce, I would say, hazards in the workplace, things like that, because people actually have to work hard to get in there. I'm not saying anything against black people as a whole, but yeah, this disparity is going to happen in either example. But guess what's going to happen? You're going to challenge people to grow. You're going to challenge people to succeed through failure. And I think that's justified through other examples I can promote to you. But we don't have enough time in this debate to delve into all that stuff.
Maybe in the open panel.
Yeah.
So my questions now for Marte is so the first one here is like historically we've seen segregation has like some type of unequal access amongst people when it comes to like education, healthcare, opportunities, these things. What specific mechanism, if any, ensures that those outcomes are going to be different this time?
I would say, and this is going to sound really like I'm dumbing shit down, but common sense approach. I think that if we're going to be holding people to certain standards, which we've always done throughout the course of our timeline, I think that we know what the Jim Crow law looks like. I think that we know what these abuses look like. I think that if we have a diagram of like a historical approach and examples through things that have happened, which are rife with abuse in history, we know now what not to do. Like in my example that I approached vigilante with is if, like, let's say Jim Crow never existed and it's shown its ugly face and we didn't know what that looked like, we would experience what not to do while probably suffering under the guise of like, oh shit, this is bad, we should do away with this, which is what we've done. But now that we have like something that we can historically look at as a point of reference is what not to do, we can now know what something looks like if it reveals its ugly face and eliminate it. And like we've done that through our presidency, we've had Donald Trump as a president. He's actually eliminated a lot of these LGBTQ programs that have been rife with abuse and overarching premise through civil rights as well too. He's eliminated a lot of that. And I think that, guess what happened? Lawsuits reduced as a result of this as well too. It's been more black and white than anything else. But under the gray area, under the Obama administration, when these were being abused all the time, lawsuits were at an all-time high. We can see that. But because we know that we made mistakes in the past, we can know not what to do. And I know that's a very simple answer, almost kind of broad, pun intended. But at the same time, we know not what to do. And I think that if we have a black and white approach, it's better, pun intended.
Did you have anything for that, Vigilante?
No.
All right. And then, so my next question is like, because it sounded like earlier you were saying, and it seems like you're still saying, like, segregation is acceptable. So, like, what prevents like a return to like white-only hospitals? Like, because it was mentioned about Jim Crow. So, what prevents a return to that?
So what's going to prevent that is like, I think, so here's the thing though. My whole goal isn't exactly like an absolute prevention. And here I can explain why. Aerospace industry, let's go back to that, is like 70% dominated by white people. There's nothing that's going to prevent that because there's I would say a filter. The great filter people have to pass through, which is knowledge, education, standards, and things like that. That's one clear example of like the closest thing to an absolute, like 70% is a massive fucking high number. There's nothing that we can do to reduce this because you have to have safety standards, things like this. So if you're going to have a hospital, guess what's going to happen? You're going to have to hold everybody to a certain standard because if you have DEI heart surgeons, they're going to be lawsuited into oblivion and they're going to be, that's what's going to happen. You have DEI heart surgeons, you're never going to have a hospital again too. There's never anything that's an absolute mechanism that's going to prevent discrimination. Just like the aerospace industry, 70% dominated by white people, there's not an absolute that's going to prevent this. Let's say in your hypothetical that there's 100% white staffed hospital. Well, guess what? Now I have to fucking compete regardless because there's nothing I could have done to prevent this. Because if you allow like people to get in through non-merit based studies, lawsuits go up. So you have to either decrease safety standards or increase merit in the entry level of people's competency level.
That's not what the question was, buddy. When we're talking about preventing whites only places, we're talking about preventing things. Hold on, no. We're talking about literally the return to legitimate segregation, where you have signs on the door that say no blacks allowed. What is preventing a hospital or a restaurant or
There's no
a
such
club
thing as
or a
an
movie theater? No.
You can't.
What is preventing
You can't prevent
a hospital, a movie theater? The Civil Rights Act literally prevents it. You can't throw a sign on the door that says no blacks allowed. What is preventing that from coming back?
Two things that I'll tell you that prevents this. Boycotting will prevent this. We've had this before. That's actually literally shut businesses down because you cut off the lifeblood. That's going to eliminate this. And then the next thing too is that we see one-sided approach. We have black-owned barbershops. Guess what's going to happen if I have a white-owned barbershop? Racism gets sued into oblivion. They don't exist. We have a BLM scholarship that no shit literally exists, but we don't have a White Lives Mattership scholarship. You see how this reverse happens in society right now? It gets wrought with abuse to where it's now you have blacks as like the most racist people in society. Hate to say this, but that's black culture in a nutshell to some degree. We need to reverse this. But in order to reverse this, things need to happen. You know what I'm saying? Like in order to make an eggs are going to be broke. But if you have an all-white barbershop and it says whites only, now hold on. You're absolutely saying that, okay, I'm not allowing, that actually goes to my point. You're saying I'm not allowing things through non-merit. Meaning like just because your race, color, and creed, which goes back to my merit-based act. You can't deny somebody because of their sex. If you have a sign saying I'm denying you because of your sex, that literally goes to my point. We're eliminating that through the Unity Through Merit Act as well, too. The same thing that the Civil Rights Act tried to do, I do. Only there's more ingrained work structure and more incentivization to create a free market.
All right. So that'll be my questions there. So we're going to move into the chat Q&A. Doesn't look like we have too many super chats there. So if you want to get your questions in, drop those questions in the Q&A, or you can get your super chat in to be put up ahead. So we'll start the timer here. And $4.99 comes in from Hman, says, keep up the hosting. How can we argue DEI or CRA isn't discriminatory? If it was demonstrated, Harvard and Ivy League had to change tune in admission.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, I already have said multiple times that DEI can be used as discrimination. So.
Yeah, but he's alluding to the pointing of reversing the standards that the universities had. So now we're pumping out students who are less qualified, getting bullshit degrees, spending thousands of dollars, and ending up as baristas, which is crazy. That's one good example. The quality of production of people that you're producing for society is going to lower the quality of your society, which means other countries and societies are going to outcompete us and outpace us, which I think is bullshit. We need to reverse that.
I mean, part of the problem with people getting degrees and going and working in low-wage jobs is because of the fact that we don't have a merit-based system. You can get the degree, and that degree in a lot of cases doesn't fucking mean anything.
We don't have a merit-based system, which is why we need the Unity Through Merit Act. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I mean, I've said multiple times that I agree with putting in more merit-based structures. The problem is we also need the Civil Rights Act.
But if you have the Civil Rights Act is more fraught with abuse than my system. So
you look,
I've more of a solution-based oriented approach, whether yours
I've already said that adding your law on top of the Civil Rights Act would be a good idea.
So hold on, you just literally conceded everything. I just want to point this out by saying, wait, hold on. The reason why I'll say you even conceded this, and I'll point this out logically, is saying, yeah, we should do away with this or change this, which is a removal of the Civil Rights Act in change, duty, or function of it.
It's not a removal.
I'm glad. I actually agree with you. We should change this or remove this. So when you're doing this, it's a change which is coherence to some sort of removal in some degree. So it's a partial concession of that ideological claim that you made right there. So it's like, if you say that the current function's bad, we should change it or remove functions and things like this. You're moving towards my diagram in this debate.
No, because agreeing and acknowledging that the Civil Rights Act has gaps it is saying, yes, that we do need to fill those gaps, but it is not saying that we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater and get rid of the Civil Rights Act in order to fill those gaps.
No, it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. What we're doing is we're doing, because the baby in this example is society, not really this ideological premise or this I would say this act that we had. I think that we should replace this. Right? We're giving life to a nation that is on life support when it comes to this, because we're dying as a nation because of the lack of merit in society, the lack of incentivization, the lack of competitive value that we have in our fellow man that's not being bolstered by the current act. I think that if we go to my ideological claim, it's not actually throwing a baby out. It's actually giving new life to the nation. And the nation in this example is the baby, not the act itself, because the nation's suffering. The act isn't suffering. The act is causing more suffering, but I'm closing the gaps on this through the unity of merit-based acts, the unity through merit act.
Yeah, but if we do the unity through merit act and then also remove the Civil Rights Act, it opens up new gaps. That's why I said adding the unity, it does, because then it gets rid of all of the segregation and discrimination protections.
No, how can you sue my company if I have a clear black and white distinction for saying that I have Christian values? Like you said, let's go back to the ridiculous, nonsensical approach that you've even had so we can move along with the super chats. Your whole premise of saying that a lesbian should be a minister in a Christian church that has had a 2,000 years of unchanging principles because of this, lesbian principle that they've had, which they can't change according to you or anything like that, is crazy. But guess what's going to happen? If we have a delineation saying that, no, you can't sue this church. This is written on the pamphlets. You identified that this is what you're walking into. They're not doing that. Cut, point blank, simple. You can't sue them. Guess what? You don't have a lawsuit anymore. Shit's bullshit.
Ideals don't override immutable characteristics.
They do. They do.
No, they don't.
Hold on. They do when they encroach on a 2,000-year unchanged belief and ideology in a system that actually goes against promoting genetic dead ends. I think that that's good. And I think that, to me, I'll have another debate with you if you want on why we should prevent this. And I don't think that Christianity should conform to their ideals. That's ridiculous and nonsensical. I can't believe you've even postulated that.
Immutable characteristics are by far more important than somebody's personal beliefs.
I disagree when it comes to this example.
All right. Next, we got 5 gifted memberships from Trench Deacon. Thank you very much for the gifted memberships and welcome to our new members. And then we got 10 comes in from BB with a kangaroo just hopping along. Thank you very much for that, BB. Then we got Prince of Dogs for $5. Says, this is Sparta. Thank you very much, Prince of Dogs. Then Trench comes in with $10 and says, people like Vigilante have no idea how fallacious, insulting, and degrading their weaponizing of Black trauma and history is for their political or philosophical ends. No comment, Trench.
Look, actually, I will comment. I never said what I was going to be doing as a white person wasn't insulting.
You see how he
I knew exactly. Well, here's the thing. I knew exactly what I was doing. You should have. If you were here for my opening statement, you would have known that I knew exactly what I was doing, because it should have been very clear that I wasn't entirely acting in good faith from the first paragraph of my opening statement. Which I will admit is very out of character for me, isn't it, Easy?
True. This is true. Che Folger says, I isn't cool all I think what they meant to say is I gave Cool all my money today. Blame him for small donut. Fucking Cool. What the hell, man?
Cool is in your stream. See,
Fucking Cool, Vic. What the hell, dude? No, I'm just
free
kidding.
market society. I love it.
Thank you for the $2. It's all dollars are greatly appreciated. Chench for $10 says, question, can anyone unpack more detriments to the Black community stemming from DEI and or civil rights pertaining to culture, economics, employment, education, family security, health, etc.?
Yeah, I think that this has been detrimental. If we reverse the discrimination on people by saying I'm a victim class forever, you'll never stop becoming a victim. And here's one thing that I'll tell you that's a detriment. I think that when you accept handouts, you're not allowed to fail, like I said before. And I know you said more, which means I have to come up with something new. I think that you develop a permanent victim class in society, and Blacks will say, well, shit, I didn't get that because of this. Well, none of that includes any merit. And when we say this as Black people, I think that we're just creating more excuses as to why we can't achieve and blaming people instead of working hard and learning through failure, hard work, determination, and these previous principles that have come before us. Mind you, as I brought up before, prior to the Civil Rights Act, we had more Black nuclear families intact more than ever, more Black businesses that have had a longer tenure more than anything before civil rights. But guess what happened? After civil rights, all that shit fell apart. Why is that? Because Blacks were given handouts. They were given free passes to get out of jail free card and all this. That was never a solution. Matter of fact, I've offered a great replacement value. And I think that that's a great direction we need to head to. It's not perfect, mind you, but it's a better solution than what my opponents offered.
Do you think the Civil Rights Act is what caused the deterioration of the Black family? Or do you think it's the weaponization of things like the war on drugs against the Black community that has destroyed Black families more?
You know, the ideology with the war on Black family through the crack era that happened, you've developed a new era of entrepreneurs on street corners, right? This has happened. Well, my argument against that would be like, you didn't have to take, said drugs from CIA agents or whatever, this whole tinfoil hat thing. I'm not too knowledgeable about that, but that's the rumor from what I've heard, and that may have happened, but we didn't have to accept that. Blacks could have denied this and said, no, thanks. I'm not going to be a detriment and aid in the disparaging of my community through offering drugs, through creating the ideals of like fake entrepreneurship, which you're not a real entrepreneur. All you are is a person that creates more of a mercenary environment through incentivization of self and solo interest, which at the detriment of society, that's what that creates, which means that to the two, I'll even conflate them. On either side of the board, Blacks are given a handout. They're saying, I'm going to accept these drugs to create more entrepreneurship through myself, and we're going to have big gold chains and all that shit. Didn't help, right? The same mindset through Civil Rights Act is we're reversing this to get through free handouts and saying because of the color of my skin, not merit-based. Yeah, we're just going to do this. Drugs were a handout. We're going to create the illusion of work ethic on the street corner and kill our community. The same thing we're doing with the Civil Rights Act is we're reversing racism, using this against people, telling us we're forever a victim no matter what, and we're justified. All this creates a faulty justification. None of this. Both acts handicap the Black environment and everything else. Now, granted, Civil Rights Act alone didn't do this. The mindset around this, which also coincides with the Civil Rights Act of I'm forever a victim, has done this to us.
All right. Next one we got is $5 from Sempiternal Chaos just to give us support. Thank you very much. I appreciate that big time. Frankie coming in with a gifted membership. Thank you very much, Frankie. I appreciate that big time. And welcome to our new member. BB for $10 just with the rock on. Thank you very much. Rock on to you as well, BB. Thank you very much. And Trench with another $10 says, if civil rights are real or are immovable through legislation, would forcing blasphemy, apostasy, anathema. Fuck you, Trench, for making me read that. Anathema. Fucking tongue twisted me up. I was trying to read it fast. Blasphemy, apostasy, anathema, and heresy. There we go. I got it. asshole. Lesbian priests on Christians be a violation of the rights of Christians.
I'm fucking dying.
That was a tongue twister. I was trying to read it fast and I got all fucked up.
He made you work for that 10. That's good. That's merit-based. That's a merit-based approach. Good.
I mean, I've kind of addressed this already multiple times. The immutable characteristics are more important than ideologies.
All right.
I disagree with that. You can't force people to change their ideology because you said I was born this way, when really it's like if everybody was born this way, we'd have a dead civilization. These genetic dead ends can't say that we're going to promote life while also not promoting life at the same time by not promoting birth. So you have to use straight people to actually promote your society, or like do you see how the ideological belief system is like kind of overlapping with these things that you say are immutable characteristics? It's like, yeah, to me, that doesn't really make any sense, because scientifically we can't even promote this because you're promoting a dead end society. So
we're talking about 1% of the population.
Yeah, this 1%, we're asking a greater percent to bend at the knee for, which is ridiculous, which is a dead end prophetical ideological system. So
it's not even bend the knee. It's just don't fucking discriminate. Don't be a dick. It's literally just don't be a dick.
Boycott then. Boycott. There's your solution. Boycott, cut the lifeblood of financial gain from this company. Don't promote
boycott
your dollars.
In reality, boycotting barely ever works. Like, for example, people have boycotted Chick-fil-A for fucking decades now because of their fucking ownership, and they're still here.
So hold on, the boycotting
doesn't work.
I'll give you a good example of how it works. So when we had bullshit movies that came out, which were putting like a female heroine, is because this is like kind of like the whole sex thing, a female heroine, and people didn't buy into it because the character wasn't believable, because they didn't have a character development arc. They were just given, like Captain Marvel, all these powers all of a sudden, all this other bullshit. It bombs. The fact that movies bomb.
Have you ever read the fucking comics? Have you ever read the comics? The comic version of Captain Marvel is 10 times more powerful than the MCU version.
Absconding the comments, like separating those two, because there's two distinctions. There's a lot of people that watch the movies that have never read the comics. These movies have bombed. Matter of fact, the reason why they bombed is because the characters are unrelatable, which means that if they bombed, it means that they've been boycotted, to where it's like, oh, the studio hasn't had funding to have part 2 now. Unfortunately, there wasn't great incentive. This happens with other movies, not just that. That's a form of boycotting, and that works. That's an amazing example that destroys your whole fucking premise of boycotting not working.
Not watching something because it's not interesting or not good isn't boycotting.
That is boycotting. I'm choosing not to fund something because I don't believe in it anymore.
Not buying something because it sucks isn't boycotting.
It is It's a form of boycotting.
No, it's not. It's just the free market.
It's just the
free market doing its job, and shit that sucks not fucking getting bought and going into extinction. That's not boycotting.
Okay, definition of boycotting is withdrawal from commercial or social relations or a company organization as a punishment or protest. If they don't like it, they're not going to buy it. That's boycotting. Definition, that's boycotting. I looked that up.
An example of boycotting would be like what the left did with the fucking Harry Potter game, and that game is still fucking did a hell of a lot of sales and shit because it was a good game.
Yeah, there's different levels of boycotting. There's going to be boycotting that actually works because it's impactful, but there's also going to be a threshold of boycotting working really well. Like in the case of box office bombs and shit like that. Like what makes a B movie is because maybe the production value is low and shit like that. And matter of fact, there are B movies that have fucking plummeted. I think that Quentin Tarantino had made a low budget movie that fucking was legendary. I forgot what the name of this was, but all of a sudden, next thing you know, it's like a cult classic now. DVDs, all these other things have prompted like sales in the future. I forgot what that's called, royalties and shit like that. That's where now the guy's fucking fucking stupid rich off of this one movie alone if he didn't have anything else. That's the opposite. Now, if you have a movie that's billions of dollars in production with Tom Cruise and all this other shit and they have woke ideals and then people don't watch that because they don't appreciate the quality, that's a form of boycotting. They don't like that. Sinks and it goes bad. There's a threshold of how powerful boycotting is or isn't. We can both agree on that. Boycotting does work.
So if I don't buy mushrooms because I don't like the taste of mushrooms, is that me boycotting mushroom manufacturers?
Yeah, individually, yeah. That's a form of boycotting. Look at the definition.
All right.
You're doing that individually. Yeah. If you get enough people, it's more powerful.
Prince of Dogs comes in for $2, just says, drop those questions. Thank you very much, Prince of Dogs. BB comes in with another 10, says, does race really matter?
Nope.
No, but that's the point of having the Civil Rights Act, is to prevent people from prioritizing race over anything over other things like merit.
But if you look right now, it's been used and weaponized. And what I'm doing is offering something that actually prevents that. Because like I said, DEI is something separate from the Civil Rights Act, but it's also bolstered the Civil Rights Act. DEI in its inception was actually integrated to stop this. But guess what's happened? People have found a way to abuse the system. What they're doing with the Civil Rights Act is abusing the system. They're using race as the thing to stop, to now reverse Uno it on people that they're saying that they're a forever victim class. This is bad, man. All bad.
Because people like Jeff Bezos have abused the free market. Should we get rid of the free market?
What are you talking about? Abuse the free market? Can you kind of go into that a little bit? What do you mean by that? Abuse the free market?
By abusing the free market, I'm talking about things like underpaying workers. Well, mostly underpaying workers, but specifically exploiting workers and not providing adequate protections for them, not allowing them to do like bathroom breaks and shit like that, which is something that Amazon has actually been caught for. Like because people like Jeff Bezos have exploited and abused the free market. Should we get rid of the free market?
So here's the thing, though. The free market actually corrects itself, because I know I'm familiar with the Amazon thing. Like, I'm not going to tell you how familiar I am with that, but like with the Amazon thing, a few people got together and they complained about this, the bathroom break issue. Guess what happened? They went outside external to the company and they were awarded fucking funds because of this. And what happened is the problem kind of corrected itself. And now they've developed some safeguards towards this. Yes, I can cite a few cases.
You can literally go on social media and see plenty of examples of people still fucking posting.
There's going to be
fucking piss ball. Does it become an antidote when people are actually posting evidence of their fucking piss bottles in their Amazon truck because they're not allowed bathroom breaks?
I'll give you an example. This is crazy, but a lot of the people that I know at an Amazon facility are pissing in these trucks because they know that if all right, I'm a student in school, working through school right now. So a lot of these people at this facility are when they're doing these delivery routes, the reason why they're pissing is because they just want to get their route done faster. They could be done at like 8:30, for example, because I know that this facility, like, they have to get done by 8:30, but they all get out the door at 11. The reason why is because they get these things called roundups, which means that if they get done at like 6:30 or 6 o'clock, the company matches this and rounds it up to where it's like, we're just going to pay you till 8, as if you work till 8, because they just don't want to work. And these people are voluntarily skipping their lunch breaks and saying, I'm not going to do this because I just want to get out early, because I know that if I take a piss break, it's going to set me back like 30 packages, shit like this. And I'm just like, people are knowingly being given lunch breaks and breaks during their routes, and they're foregoing this to do piss bottle stuff. And the company knows this. They're saying, well, as long as you get rid of these piss bottles, it's whatever. It's happening, but you can't avoid that. People are actually abusing the system the other way and saying, we're just going to refuse our systems and actually get paid money to get done early so that we can get paid for hours we don't work. So they're actually doing this the opposite way. That's what's happening, actually, to be honest with you. Abusing the market goes both ways, buddy. Right. So you're at the behest of the same question you asked me. Thank you. The question I asked you was, should we get rid of the free market because people abuse it? No, We shouldn't get rid of the free market because people abuse that, but that's different
Then
from
why?
the
Then
Civil
why
Rights Act.
should we get? No, it's
Civil
not
Rights Act
because
is
it's
a whole
you're-
different thing. The Civil Rights Act though, is a whole different thing. The free market is what we should enable because we're allowing competitive virtues. Now, if you're talking about the integration of lunch breaks and all this other shit, that's a whole different thing. We can dive into that later. But if you're going to conflate people pissing in bottles because they just want to get done early so they can get money from the company for hours they don't work, and comparing this to like the Civil Rights Act for people being hired from race-based ethics or maybe even like quotas and shit like that. Those are two different things you're trying to conflate. This is all crazy, bro.
All right, we got Prince of Dogs comes in twice in a row with $2. Says nothing, just showing some support. Thank you very much. And a Prince of Dogs again comes in with a gifted 5 membership. Shout out to you, Prince of Dogs, and welcome to all our new members. All right, Frankie Shark member for 30 months. Jeez, let's go. Legend OG in the chat right here, everybody. Everybody better recognize, all right? Best creator in chat on YouTube. Thank you, Easy, for all you do for us. Wow, 30 months. Yes, that's absolutely amazing. And thank you for the ongoing support, Frankie. You're absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you so
Easy.
much.
Just as a debater, I appreciate you for letting me on your platform, and thank you for meeting me on neutral grounds. Vigilante, I appreciate it, man. The spirited back and forth.
Yeah, this one's been a good one. $5 from Prince of Dogs says W Frankie. Yes, W Frankie, indeed. Trench says priority question for $20. Thank you very much, Trench. Would forcing Muslim women to remove their hijabs be a violation of their civil rights? Ooh.
W Trench. W Trench for this one. It's a good question, actually.
that would be a violation of civil rights because that is prioritizing, because there is religious protections in the Civil Rights Act. So when we're talking, okay, so when we're like going back to the question you asked before, when we're talking about so there's blanket protections for religion, but the protections for religion do not override the protections for immutable characteristics.
So, I mean, at least you're consistent about this, like to some degree. But the lesbian thing, I think, is crazy because you're telling people to not acclimate to a religion when in its premise, it would destroy the core principles of said religion if you're allowing infiltration to come in and basically break apart their belief structure. It's like, why do we even have religions in the first place if people can't uphold to their pure doctrine and be fundamentalist at the heart of this belief system? To me, your thing just emboldens the destruction of Christianity, Muslim, and everything else. And if you think about this, if you map this on to businesses, you're destroying cultures of businesses if you map this on, and also the traditions that businesses may have as well too, by saying, because I feel I was born this way as a lesbian or whatever this is. Crazy nonsense.
I would disagree that being gay or being lesbian or whatever is against the core principles of Christianity, but that's a completely different topic.
I still hold the same premise, but yeah.
Gotta talk on mute at least once. It wouldn't be a speakeasy stream if I didn't. Bandit comes in for $2, says for speakeasy and Marte. Thank you very much for that, Bandit. And now let's go over to the questions. If anyone wants to bump themselves up with a super chat, feel free. Seeker comes in for the first one, says, which civil rights act should we get rid of?
When I say the Civil Rights Act, I'm talking about gutting the whole system and just replacing it. So when you say which, I'm talking about like just the Civil Rights Act as a whole. What I'm offering is like a whole new framework for this. So that way we can actually now proceed forward in saying, all right, instead of incentivizing people to wear a costume and get in and just say, because I'm black, that's why I got this job, we're eliminating that. I think it's bullshit. Just the whole overarching, like I'm speaking in generalities because I'm saying the whole system needs to be gutted and reviewed, because what my opponent offers and postulates is rife with abuse. And he's saying, well, we can't stop it on our end. It's going to happen regardless. I'm saying that On my side, we're going to have benevolent discrimination because you can eliminate discrimination. But at least there's a standard in a black and white line that we're drawing. And I think that that's good, especially we have safeguards like a committee that works in symbiosis with the states, things like this.
Okay. Mrs. Foxworth says, should competence ever be negotiable to satisfy policy goals?
No.
So you agree?
Okay. Okay.
agree.
And also from Mrs. Foxworth says, Vigilante, please explain, if standards are the same for everyone, how does that leave room for segregation?
Because applying standards, so with what specifically with like what Marte is talking about, where we apply the standards towards everybody, that doesn't prevent discrimination because you can still have things like the fucking no blacks allowed signs. It would literally allow for that to come back because it doesn't prevent their and no. it doesn't legally prevent discrimination. You're just talking about hiring based off of merit.
So I'm going to actually counter that because I think that's bullshit. The reason why it actually prevents that is because the Unity Through Merit Act literally prevents race-based entry. So when you say things like, oh, we're going to have all whites only shops and this and that, no. When I'm saying merit, we're eliminating race completely. So you can't even have that even in my diagram that I've offered through Unity Through Merit Act. This isn't the Unity Through Race Act. This isn't the Civil Rights Act, which is solely, if you think about this in principle, is trying to prevent racism, which actually uses and weaponizes racism. Unity Through Merit Act says we're unifying underneath the premise of entry level through merit. So which eliminates you putting up a whites only sign on any business or black only sign. Merit, not race. We're deleting that.
But if you put it up you just put in merit, that doesn't prevent anybody from discriminating based off of race.
It does, because now we have new standards that we have to embolden. We have a committee and oversight that works in conjunction with the state at the state level through legislation, and they oversee this. If you put up a sign and it talks about race, nowhere in my diagram or even in the foundational structure and principles did I ever mention race. The way to get in through this is hard work.
It doesn't prevent people from discriminating based off of race.
This does, because obviously if you and I see that there's a whites only fountain, is that race or not? We can both see that with our two eyes, right? We would say, no, you have to actually walk over to the fountain and work with your two legs to get there. You don't do this because you're white or black. Unity Through Merit Act eliminates all this because to me, this is common sense, bro. Like that, all I'm offering and arguing is for common sense, saying no race entry level for anything.
All right.
You can't have that.
Go
can't
ahead.
have that without discrimination protections.
Though it doesn't prevent discrimination. It creates benevolent discrimination, meaning like you aren't allowed in unless you work for this, right? Meaning jobs, equity through education, things like this, meaning that the person that's going to teach your student didn't get there through just skin color and costume, design their way in, or the person that's working on your heart didn't get there because of their skin or whatever this is, or creed. They got there through hard work, and they know that they could prevent the deaths and save lives through demonstrating principles of standardization.
All right. We got last $20 comes in from Frankie, says no question, just a tip for my creator and wifey. Thank you very much, Frankie. Absolutely amazing. Like I said, legend in the chat. Also, I'll give you this last question I seen here just because I did highlight it, and since Frankie had no question, so I'll get Steelborn's question in there quick. For Vigilante, why should everyone be treated equally?
Good question, Steelborn.
Because I reject the premise. We're all fucking humans. All humans should be treated the same. There's no reason not to treat everybody equally and give everybody equal opportunity.
Yeah, but I think what he's referring to, well, actually, I'm assuming here, but I think what we can surmise there is like outcome. We're not talking about outcome. How do you prevent, equity through outcome? How do you prevent that?
Well, I think Vigilante answered its question because I think he was just saying like why should every human be treated equally, and Vigilante is just saying like why not? Like we're all human, we should be treated equally, just strictly off of being human.
I reframed that. I just wanted to challenge the notion of this being like a non-answer almost.
So you were reframing this question. I got it. We'll reframe all the questions we want in the after panel. Listen, that is going to wrap up the Q&A for the night. Again, big shout out to everyone in the chat for your support, all the questions, the engagement. Again, this support is what helps me keep bringing you these debates and this entire Swords of Reason experience week after week. I appreciate every one of you from the bottom of my heart, honestly. And of course, a huge thank you to our debaters as well for stepping into the arena tonight and sharpening their ideas in front of all of us. Let me just check real quick. Are you both staying for the open panel?
I'm probably hopping off because I do have to go to bed soon.
Okay.
If I don't, I'm going to end up staying up way longer than I should because I have to work long.
I am only doing a short after panel today too. I'm only going to be going till 1:30 a.m. Eastern. So if that helps you at all, but
I work at 9, so
okay, yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. If you gotta go, you gotta go. That's fair. But here's what's going to happen next. We're going to run the debate outro song and video. It's going to run for about 4 minutes. Perfect time. Everyone hit the washroom, grab a drink, stretch your legs, do whatever you need to do before the Chaos and Chill open panel begins. All right. During the outro, I'm going to drop the link in the chat for anyone who wants to join the open panel, test your ideas, continue the conversation, all of that. Anyone is welcome to hop in. Just obviously come ready to think, question, debate, all that. And if you're going to try to come just to like spurg over everyone, troll people, bring personal dramas, that type of shit, you're just going to get muted and most likely booted real quick. So while you're ahead with this idea, just quit it. And before we run the outro, one last reminder, make sure you subscribe to both debaters. Their links are in the description, okay? And if you're enjoying these debates, hit the subscribe to the Speakeasy channel as well so you don't miss any of the Swords of Reasons battles. We have Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. This is where logic meets passion. All right, let's roll the outro, and I will see you all in a few minutes for the Chaos and Chill.